I watched the branch director turn white as a sheet, and that was far more terrifying than the $2.1 million flashing on his screen. He was not afraid of me because he was terrified of something inside his own company. Then he delivered the sentence that made my stomach bottom out. He said someone had been trying to steal this from me for 3 years, and it was not just my sister. My name is Lucy Hughes, and right now, I am sitting in a room that smells like lemon polish and cold sweat. It is the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster or a prison sentence. The room is enclosed in frosted glass, separating us from the hum of the Great Plains Mutual Branch office here in Richmond. But the glass does not block out the feeling that the air inside has suddenly become too thin to breathe. I am 34 years old. I have spent the last decade of my life auditing logistics invoices, hunting for discrepancies in shipping manifests that other people find boring. I am used to silence. I am used to people ignoring me until they need a mistake fixed. But I am not used to being looked at the way Evan Caldwell is looking at me right now. Evan Caldwell is the branch director. He is a man who probably owns a boat he rarely uses and wears suits that cost more than my first car. But at this moment, sitting across the mahogany table from me, he looks like a man who has just realized he is standing on a trap door. His skin has taken on a peculiar, waxen gray tone, the color of wet newsprint. His hand is resting on the polished wood of the conference table, and I can see the tremor in his fingers. It is slight, but it is there. He is vibrating. To his right sits Tessa Hart, the corporate lawyer. She is different. If Evan is the nervous wreck, Tessa is the concrete wall he is about to crash into. She has not blinked in what feels like 3 minutes. Her hands are folded on top of a pristine legal pad, and her eyes are fixed on me with a laser-like intensity that suggests she is trying to scan my skeleton for fractures. "Ms. Hughes," Evan starts, and his voice cracks. He clears his throat, a wet, nervous sound that seems too loud in the quiet room. "Thank you for coming in on such short notice. You called me 3 times before 8 in the morning," I say, keeping my voice level. "I assumed it was important." Evan tries to smile, but it looks more like a grimace of pain. He taps his finger on a computer screen that is turned away from me. "We need to discuss the policy regarding your grandmother, Vivian Hughes," Evan says. I feel a dull ache in my chest at the mention of her name. It has only been 5 days since she passed, 3 days since the funeral. The grief is still a sharp, jagged stone in my throat. "I thought everything was settled," I say. "My sister, Reagan, said she handled the paperwork. She told me the policies were old, expired." Evan's eyes dart to the computer screen, then back to me. He looks terrified. Not of me, I realize with a jolt. He is terrified of the information he is holding. "Ms. Hughes," Evan says, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "the policy your grandmother held with Great Plains Mutual is unique. It is what we call a legacy whole life contract. Purchased in 1972, it has a heavy accumulation clause that hasn't been common in the industry for 40 years. He pauses, licking his dry lips. "The policy is not expired," he says. "It is fully active, and because your grandmother never borrowed against it, never missed a premium, and let the dividends reinvest for over 50 years, the compounding effect has been significant." I frown. "Significant?" Evan takes a breath. "The current death benefit payout, excluding the final terminal dividend which we are still calculating, stands at approximately $2,100,000. The world stops. The hum of the air conditioning vanishes. The frosted glass walls seem to tilt. "I'm sorry," I stammer, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Did you say 2 million?" $2,100,000, Evan corrects, emphasizing the numbers as if they are a curse. I feel sick, physically sick. My stomach turns over. Hard. 3 days ago. I close my eyes, and the image burns behind my eyelids. The reception hall at Maple Crest Memorial. The smell of lilies and stale coffee. My sister, Reagan, standing by the refreshments table, looking radiant in her designer black dress, holding a thick yellowed envelope that Mr. Weller, Grandma's old lawyer, had just handed to her. I remember the look on Reagan's face. It was a look of utter dismissal, a sneer of boredom. "Old trash," she had said, and then, with a flick of her manicured wrist, she had tossed the envelope into the trash can next to the coffee stirrers. She threw it away like it was a used napkin. She threw away $2,100,000 because she couldn't be bothered to read the fine print. And I had let her, because Reagan is the smart one. Reagan is the star. Reagan knows best. "Ms. Hughes?" I snapped my eyes open. Evan is watching me, waiting for a reaction. He probably expects me to cheer, to cry with joy, but I just feel cold. "My sister," I managed to say. "She threw the papers away." Evan freezes. "She what?" "At the funeral," I say, the words tasting like ash. "She threw the policy documents in the trash. She said they were worthless." A strange sound comes from the other side of the table. It is the corporate lawyer, Tessa Hart. She lets out a short, sharp breath through her nose. It is not a laugh. It is the sound of a predator spotting a limp. Tessa reaches down to a leather briefcase by her feet. She lifts it onto the table with a heavy thud. The sound echoes in the room like a gavel strike. "She threw the papers away," Tessa repeats, her voice cool and devoid of emotion. "That is interesting, because according to our logs, your sister has been very interested in this policy for quite some time." Tessa opens the briefcase and pulls out a thick file folder. She slides it across the mahogany table toward me. It stops inches from my hands. "Open it," Tessa commands. I hesitate, then reach out. My fingers feel numb. I flip open the cover. Inside, there are photocopies of forms, dozens of them. They are change of beneficiary requests, standard forms from Great Plains Mutual. I look at the dates. October 2023, I read aloud. January 2024. March 2025. There are 6 distinct requests. 6 attempts, Tessa says. Over the last 3 years. 6 times. Someone submitted a request to change the primary beneficiary on Vivian Hughes's policy. I look at the new beneficiary line on the top form. Reagan Hughes. The name is written in block letters. Confident. Bold. I flip to the next page. Reagan Hughes. And the next. Reagan Hughes. They were all rejected, Tessa says, her eyes drilling into mine. Do you know why? I look at the bottom of the form, at the signature line. It is signed Vivian Hughes. But it is wrong. My grandmother was a bookkeeper. Her handwriting was precise, sharp, jagged like a seismograph reading. The signature on this page is loopy. It tries to look shaky, like an old woman's hand, but the pressure points are all wrong. It is a performance of a signature, not the real thing. The signatures didn't match, I whisper. Correct, Tessa says. Our fraud detection algorithm flagged them immediately. The slope is off by 15 degrees. The pen pressure is consistent with someone right-handed trying to write with a tremor. Your grandmother was left-handed. The forger didn't know that. I stare at the name Reagan Hughes again. Reagan knew Grandma was left-handed. Reagan grew up in the same house. Reagan watched Grandma write checks for 20 years. Why would she make such a stupid mistake? Unless she was arrogant, unless she thought no one would check. 6 times, I say, my voice trembling. She tried to steal this 6 times while Grandma was still alive? And she failed 6 times, Tessa says. Which brings us to today. The policy pays out to the original beneficiary designated in 1972. That is you, Ms. Hughes. You are the sole beneficiary. I should feel relief. I should feel vindicated. But I don't. I feel a creeping sense of dread, because I am looking at Evan Caldwell again. The director is not looking at the file. He is looking at his phone, which is vibrating silently on the table. He looks like he wants to throw it through the window. This doesn't make sense, I say, looking between them. If Reagan failed, and the money is mine, why do you look so scared? Mr. Caldwell? Evan flinches. He jerks his head up, his eyes wide. I'm just concerned about the procedural irregularities, he stammers. Procedural irregularities? I repeat. I point to the file. My sister tried to commit fraud. That's a crime, isn't it? Why am I here in a secret meeting instead of talking to the police? Because, Evan says, and his voice drops so low I have to lean in to hear him. Because of the rejection codes. Mr. Caldwell, Tessa warns, her tone sharp. Evan ignores her. He seems desperate to get something off his chest, like a man confessing sins before the ship goes down. Ms. Hughes, look at the 4th attempt, Evan says, pointing a shaking finger at the file. Look at the processing stamp in the corner. I look. It is a red stamp, faint but legible. Rejected. Level 1. So? I ask. Level 1 rejections are automatic, Evan says. Speaking faster now. They happen when the computer spots a mismatch. But look at the 5th attempt. I flip the page. There is no red stamp. Instead, there is a small, handwritten code in the margin. Override-a-UTH-04. What is that? I ask. That, Evan says, sweat beading on his forehead, is a manual override code. It means the computer rejected the signature. But a human being inside this system forced it through. It means someone at Great Plains Mutual logged in, bypassed the security protocol, and approved the change. My blood runs cold. If they approved it, I ask slowly, then why isn't Reagan the beneficiary? Because of the legal lock, Tessa interrupts, her voice icy. Your grandmother was smarter than your sister, and she was apparently smarter than us. She placed a notarized, living verification lock on her account 5 years ago. It demands that any change must be done in person, with video recording. The computer system didn't catch the override because the override was internal, but the physical vault team caught it because there was no videotape. I sit back in my chair. The pieces are clicking together, but they form a picture I don't want to see. Reagan didn't just try to forge a signature, she had help. Someone inside, I whisper. Evan nods. He looks sick. Yes, someone with high-level clearance, someone who knows the override codes. I look at Evan. He is the director. He has high-level clearance. He sees the accusation in my eyes. It wasn't me, he blurted out, too quickly. I swear to God, that's why I'm terrified. Ms. Hughes, that code? Auth-04, that's a regional manager code, but the IP address it came from was local. It came from this building. He looks around the room, at the frosted glass, as if the walls have ears. There is a ghost in my branch, Evan whispers. Someone here was working with your sister. They almost succeeded. If your grandmother hadn't put that video lock on the file, the money would have transferred to Reagan 6 months ago, and you would never have known this policy existed. I think about the funeral again. I think about Reagan throwing the envelope away. She didn't throw it away because she didn't care. She threw it away because she thought she had already lost. Or, wait, why did she look relieved? If she failed 6 times, and she knew the policy was still in my name, why throw it away? Unless she thought destroying the paper copy would destroy the evidence of her attempts? No, that doesn't make sense. Reagan is manipulative, but she isn't stupid. She knows digital records exist. Why are you telling me this? I ask Evan. If there is an insider, why not just conduct an internal investigation? Because the logs were wiped, Evan says. Until 3 days ago, when the death certificate was filed. The system did a final audit. That's when the deleted logs resurfaced. It's a failsafe. Whoever helped your sister thought they covered their tracks. But the death trigger brought it all back up. He leans forward, his hands clasping together as if in prayer. Ms. Hughes, I am going to be honest with you. This $2.1 million, it's a lot of money, but right now, that money is the least of my problems, and it should be the least of yours. What do you mean? I ask. Your sister didn't act alone, Evan says, and the person who helped her is still in this building. They know the policy has triggered. They know the audit has started, And they know you are the one standing between them and a very long prison sentence. Tessa closes the file folder. The sound is final. We are legally obligated to disperse the funds to you, Tessa says formally, but Mr. Caldwell is suggesting that you exercise extreme caution. I look at the closed file. Underneath those cardboard covers lies the proof that my sister, my own flesh and blood, spent 3 years trying to rob me. She smiled at me at Christmas. She hugged me at Thanksgiving. And all the while, she was forging Grandma's name and conspiring with a stranger in this building. I feel a cold, hard anger settling in my stomach. It replaces the nausea. I stand up. My legs feel surprisingly steady. I want copies, I say. I want copies of everything, the rejections, the override codes, the dates. We can provide that, Tessa says. Evan looks up at me. His eyes are hollow. Be careful, Ms. Hughes, he says softly. His voice is barely audible over the hum of the ventilation. Why? I ask. Reagan failed. The money is mine. It's over. Evan shakes his head slowly. A grim, terrifying smile touches the corners of his mouth. Not a smile of humor, but of irony. You think your sister throwing the paper away was the end, he says, his voice trembling just enough to make the hair on my arm stand up. But that was just when the game started. To understand why the sight of a terrified bank director did not send me running for the hills, you have to understand the life I lived before that Tuesday morning. I lived a life designed to be overlooked. I live in Richmond, Virginia, in a second-floor apartment that offers a panoramic view of an asphalt parking lot. It is not the kind of view that ends up on postcards. Most mornings, I wake up to the sound of garbage trucks reversing or the distant hum of the interstate. My neighbors are polite, transient people who nod in the hallway but never learn my name. That is exactly how I like it. My life is small, tidy, and quiet. I do not have a robust social circle. I do not have a dramatic dating life. I have a succulent on my windowsill that I have managed to keep alive for 3 years, and a Netflix queue filled with documentaries about industrial engineering. I am the person you stand behind in line at the grocery store and immediately forget the moment you walk out the door, for the past 7 years. I have worked as an administrative assistant at a company called Redwood Route Logistics Audit. It sounds boring because it is boring. My job consists of staring at shipping manifests, fuel surcharge invoices, and cross-referencing them with carrier contracts. My colleagues call me the detail hawk. They say it with a mix of affection and annoyance because I am the one who sends the email at 4:55 in the afternoon, pointing out that a decimal point has been shifted 2 places to the left on a billing statement from a trucking company in Ohio. I remember one specific afternoon last November. My supervisor, a nice but frantic man named David, was ready to sign off on a bulk payment for a fleet of cargo vans. Everyone wanted to go home. It was the day before Thanksgiving. The office smelled like stale donuts in anticipation, but I sat there, staring at the line item for mileage overages. Something felt wrong. The math worked, but the logic did not. I pulled the driver logs. I cross-referenced the GPS data. I found that the company was billing us for the distance driven by the trucks to get to the warehouse. Not just the distance of the delivery itself. It was a violation of Clause 14, Section B of our Master Service Agreement. I walked into David's office and put the paper on his desk. You are overpaying them by $12,000, I said. David looked at me, blinked, and put his pen down. He saved $12,000 that day. I got a thank you and a $20 gift card to Starbucks. I did not mind. I do not do it for the applause. I do it because I have a compulsive need to know what I'm agreeing to. This is the defining trait of my existence. I read everything. When I download a new app on my phone, I scroll through the 50 pages of terms and conditions. I read the ingredients on cereal boxes. I read the fine print on credit card offers that come in the mail. I never sign my name to a piece of paper unless I understand exactly what I'm giving away. My mother used to say this made me difficult. My sister used to say it made me paranoid. My grandmother, Vivian, used to say it made me dangerous. If I am the detail hawk, My sister Reagan is the peacock. Reagan is 2 years older than me, and she has always been the protagonist of the Hughes family movie. She is the kind of woman who walks into a room and changes the atmospheric pressure. She is beautiful, yes, with hair that always looks professionally blown out, and a smile that suggests she knows a secret you are dying to hear. But it is more than looks. It is gravity. Growing up, our house revolved around Reagan's moods, Reagan's triumphs, and Reagan's crises. If Reagan had a cold, the whole house went on lockdown. If Reagan got a part in the school play, we all spent weeks helping her memorize lines. My mother, Monica, was not abusive. She never hit me. She never starved me. She just prioritized her energy, and I was not the priority. It was a cold, efficient sort of neglect. I remember a dinner about 6 months ago. It was my birthday. I turned 34. I had driven over to my mother's house in Chesterfield. I had bought my own cake because I knew Mom would forget. Or she would buy something Reagan liked, like lemon tart, which I hate. We were sitting at the dining table. I was telling Mom about a potential promotion at Redwood Road, about how David was considering making me a senior auditor. It was a big deal for me. It meant a raise. It meant validation. Mom was nodding, but her eyes were glazing over. She was looking at the driveway. "That is nice. Lucy," she said, cutting a piece of chicken. "Really nice." Then the front door burst open. Reagan swept in, breathless, her cheeks flushed. She was wearing a coat that cost more than my rent. "You will not believe what happened to me," Reagan announced, dropping her bag on the sofa. She did not say happy birthday. She did not ask how I was. She launched into a story about a man she met at a vineyard, a misunderstanding with a waiter, and a dramatic exit that resulted in her getting a free bottle of wine. It was a funny story. Reagan tells great stories. She uses her hands. She mimics voices. She makes you feel like you are right there with her. Mom lit up. The glazed look vanished. She leaned forward, her chin in her hands, absorbed in Reagan's performance. "Oh, honey, that is hilarious." Mom laughed. "You have the worst luck, but you handle it so well." I sat there, poking at my chicken. My promotion evaporated. My birthday evaporated. I became the wallpaper again. After dinner, while Reagan was checking her makeup in the hallway mirror, Mom came into the kitchen where I was washing the dishes. "Reagan looks tired, doesn't she?" Mom asked, wiping the counter. "She has been under so much pressure lately. She just came back from a wine tour." "Mom," I said, scrubbing a plate a little too hard. Mom sighed, that long, suffering sigh she reserved for whenever I failed to be sufficiently empathetic to Reagan's plight. "You know what I mean." "Lucy," she said, "her life is complicated. It is not simple and steady like yours. You are strong. You are independent. You do not need as much maintenance. You should try to be more understanding." That was the narrative. I was the sturdy, boring mule who could carry the load. Reagan was the racehorse who needed special feed and constant grooming. I was invisible because I was functional. The only person who ever saw me was Vivian. My grandmother Vivian was 82 when she died, and she was the sharpest person I have ever known. She lived in a small brick house 3 streets over from Mom. Until her hip gave out and she moved into the assisted living facility, Vivian did not have Reagan's charm or Mom's selective hearing. Vivian was a bookkeeper for 40 years. She viewed the world as a series of ledgers, debits and credits, assets and liabilities. She did not like stories. She liked facts. I used to visit her every Tuesday and Thursday evening. It was my escape. While Reagan was out dazzling the world, and Mom was waiting by the phone for Reagan to call, I would sit in Vivian's room, drinking bad tea and playing gin rummy. Vivian was the only one who asked about my job. She wanted to know about the invoices. She wanted to hear about the audit logs. "You have a good brain, Lucy," she told me once. She was shuffling the cards, her hands spotted with age but her movements precise. "You have a brain that looks for the cracks in the pavement. Most people just walk. You look down to see where you might trip. That is a survival skill." "In this house," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the world outside her window. Meaning our family. People live by stories. Your sister lives by the story that she is a princess who is temporarily inconvenienced by reality. Your mother lives by the story that she is the benevolent matriarch. But you, Lucy, you live by evidence. I did not think much of it at the time. I just thought she was being nice. But things changed 2 months ago. It was a Tuesday. I arrived at the facility finding Vivian sitting in her armchair by the window. She was not playing cards. She was not watching the news. She was just staring at the parking lot. Her face set in a hard, grim line. She looked frail. The cancer was moving fast by then, eating away at her reserves. But her eyes were clear, dangerously clear. "Lucy," she said, without turning her head. "Come here." I walked over and sat on the ottoman beside her. She reached out and took my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers cold and dry like parchment paper. "I need you to listen to me," she said, "and I need you to listen with that auditor brain of yours, not the daughter brain, the auditor brain." "Okay. Grandma," I said, "I am listening." She turned to look at me. Her eyes were gray, like steel wool. "When I go," she said, her voice low and raspy, "when I die, there is going to be a lot of noise. Your mother will cry a lot, but she will be worried about the catering. Reagan will cry a lot, but she will be looking for the cameras. Grandma, don't." I started to say. "Hush," she snapped. "This is not a story. This is a briefing." She squeezed my hand tighter. It almost hurt. "They are going to tell you things. Lucy, they are going to tell you that I did not leave much behind. They are going to say that my accounts were empty, or that I signed things over to help the family, or that the old papers in my desk are just trash." She leaned in closer. I could smell the peppermint tea on her breath. "Do not believe them," she hissed. I stared at her. I had never seen her this intense. "What do you mean?" I asked. "What did you do?" "I did what I always do," she said. "I balanced the books." She let go of my hand and reached for the glass of water on her side table. She took a sip, her hand trembling slightly, then set it down with a clink. "There is a reason you are the one sitting here, Lucy," she said, her voice softer now. "You are the only one who reads the fine print. I am counting on that." She looked back out the window. "Don't let anyone help you too fast," she said. "That is how the con works. They rush you. They offer to handle the messy parts. They offer to carry the burden so you don't have to look inside the box. When I die, Lucy, you look inside every box. You read every piece of paper, and if Reagan offers to handle the paperwork—" She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I sat there for a long time. Holding her hand again, I thought she was just being paranoid. I thought it was the medication talking, or the fear of death making her suspicious. I knew Reagan was selfish, and I knew Mom was an enabler, but I did not think they were malicious. I did not think they were capable of actual harm. I was naive. 2 months later, Vivian was gone, and true to her prediction, the noise started immediately. The morning after she died, Reagan showed up at my apartment. She brought coffee. She brought bagels. She looked devastated, her eyes puffy, her voice trembling. "I know you are busy with work, Lucy," Reagan had said, sitting on my beige sofa. "Mom and I talked. We want to spare you the stress. I will handle the estate. I will deal with the lawyers and the funeral home. You just focus on your job. You know how you get when you are overwhelmed. Let me be the big sister for once." It sounded so kind. It sounded exactly like the help Vivian had warned me about. But even then, standing in my living room with a bagel in my hand, I did not want to believe it. I wanted to believe my sister loved me. I wanted to believe that in grief, our family would finally pull together. So I nodded. I said okay. I let her take the lead. I watched her organize the funeral. I watched her talk to the directors. I watched her collect the mail from Vivian's house. I stayed in the background, just like always, until the funeral. Until the moment I saw her standing by the trash can with that yellow envelope. Vivian's voice came back to me then, loud and clear, cutting through the funeral music. You live by evidence. I watched Reagan drop the envelope. I watched her smile, that little relieved smile. And in that second, the sister I thought I knew vanished. The star of the family vanished. All I saw was a discrepancy in the ledger of my life. Reagan had made a mistake. She thought she was tossing away a piece of paper. She didn't realize she was tossing it in front of a woman who audits logistics for a living. She didn't realize that you can hide a lie in a story. But you cannot hide a lie in a trash can when the person watching you has spent 7 years hunting for missing decimals. So, when I went back to the funeral home that night to dig through the garbage, I wasn't just a grieving granddaughter, I was the detail hawk. And when I found that policy, and I saw the rejection stamps, and I saw the name Reagan Hughes written over and over again, I didn't cry, I just went cold. And now, sitting in this glass room with Evan Caldwell, listening to him talk about internal overrides and ghosts in the system, I finally understand what Vivian meant. She wasn't just leaving me money, she was leaving me a test. She knew I was the invisible daughter. She knew I was the one they underestimated, and she knew that when they tried to rob me, they would be sloppy about it because they do not respect me enough to be careful. They think I am just the background character. They think I am just the audience for their show. I look at the file on the table. I look at the terrified director. I am done being the audience. The funeral for my grandmother, Vivian Hughes, took place on a gray, humid Friday afternoon at the Maple Crest Memorial Chapel in Midlothian. It is a place that prides itself on tasteful discretion, the kind of establishment where the carpet is so thick it swallows the sound of footsteps and the air always smells faintly of chemical lilies and floor wax. If you have ever been to a corporate merger meeting or a quarterly budget review, you would have recognized the atmosphere immediately. There was very little genuine weeping. There was, however, a great deal of handshaking, card exchanging, and murmuring about real estate values. It felt less like a farewell to a beloved matriarch and more like a mandatory networking event for the distantly related. I sat in the back row, closest to the heavy oak doors. It is my preferred position in any room. From the back, you can see the structure of things. You can see who is whispering to whom, who is checking their watch, and who is only pretending to listen. My mother, Monica, was standing near the front by the open casket. She was not crying. She was hosting. She wore a navy blue dress that was tailored to within an inch of its life, and her hair was sprayed into a helmet of perfection. She moved through the crowd of mourners with the efficiency of a campaign manager. She accepted condolences with a practiced tilt of her head, a somber tightening of her lips that suggested deep emotion without ruining her lipstick. I watched her greet Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who had not spoken to Grandma in 10 years. "Thank you for coming," I heard my mother say, her voice pitching up just enough to carry. "Mother always spoke so fondly of your garden." It was a lie. Of course, Grandma hated Mrs. Gable's garden because the ivy was invasive and strangled her azaleas. But facts had no place here. This was theater. The service was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock. At 2:10, the doors at the back of the chapel swung open with a dramatic swoosh. Heads turned. The murmuring stopped. My sister, Reagan, had arrived. She paused in the doorway just long enough to ensure every pair of eyes in the room had landed on her. She was wearing black, but not the fading, sensible black of a morning suit. She wore a black silk dress that flowed like water, paired with oversized sunglasses that she removed slowly, revealing eyes that were perfectly, tragically red-rimmed. I had to admire the timing. If she had arrived early, she would have been just another mourner. By arriving 10 minutes late, she became the event. She walked down the center aisle, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm on the few inches of hardwood not covered by the carpet. She did not look at the guests. She looked straight ahead at the casket. Clutching a handkerchief to her chest, a ripple of sympathy followed her. Poor Reagan. I heard someone whisper 2 rows ahead of me. She was so close to Vivian. I almost laughed out loud. Reagan hadn't visited Grandma in the assisted living facility for 6 months. The last time she went, She stayed for 15 minutes and spent 12 of them complaining about the cell reception in the lobby. Reagan reached the front row and collapsed into the pew next to Mom. Mom put an arm around her, and Reagan leaned into it, shoulders shaking. It was a tableau of grief so perfect it belonged on a greeting card. From my seat in the back, I saw Reagan turn her head slightly. She wasn't looking at the casket. She was looking back, over her shoulder, scanning the room. Her gaze swept over the crowd until it landed on me. For a second, the performance dropped. Her eyes were cold, calculating. She wasn't looking at me with shared sorrow. She was counting. She was checking to make sure I was in my place, silent, alone, and in the back, satisfied. She turned back to the front, and the sobbing resumed. After the service, the guests shuffled into the reception hall adjacent to the chapel for coffee and tiny stale sandwiches. The air conditioning was cranked up too high, making the room feel like a refrigerator. I stood by a potted fern, holding a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee, trying to make myself as small as possible. I watched Mom working the room. She was talking to a local councilman, laughing softly at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. Reagan was near the buffet table, surrounded by a group of Grandma's old bridge friends. She was holding court. She just went so peacefully. I heard Reagan say, her voice trembling. I was holding her hand at the end. She told me she loved us all so much. I took a sip of coffee to wash down the bile rising in my throat. I had been the one holding Grandma's hand. I had been the one there at 3 a.m. when the breathing stopped. Reagan had been at a wine tasting in Charlottesville and didn't answer her phone until the next day. I needed to get away from the lies. So I stepped back, moving deeper into the shadow of a decorative pillar. That was when I heard the voices. Mom and Reagan had drifted toward the corner, near the service entrance, thinking they were out of earshot. They were standing with their backs to the room, heads close together. I froze. "You need to relax," Mom hissed. Her voice was sharp, stripping away the public gentleness she had worn all afternoon. "You are looking frantic." "I am not frantic," Reagan whispered back. "I just want this over with. Did you talk to him?" "Yes," Mom said. "I spoke to him this morning." "And?" Reagan asked. "He says it is fine." Mom replied. "Mr. Caldwell said, just let you handle the physical copies. He said as long as that paper disappears, the rest is just administrative cleanup. Mr. Caldwell. At the time, the name meant nothing to me. It was just a name. I assumed it was someone from the funeral home, or maybe a caterer. But I filed it away. The detail hawk never deletes data." "I will handle it," Reagan said, her voice dropping lower. "I just need to make sure we don't have any surprises. If any old mail turns up, there won't be any surprises." Mom cut her off. "Just keep smiling. Go talk to the McAllisters. They are looking at you." They separated. Mom smoothed her dress and turned back to the room with a beatific smile. Reagan took a deep breath, adjusted her expression to brave sufferer, and headed toward the buffet. I stayed behind the pillar, frowning. "As long as that paper disappears." "What paper?" "Excuse me. Ms. Hughes?" I jumped. A man was standing next to me. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, wearing a gray suit that was out of fashion but impeccably pressed. He held a fedora in his hands, turning the brim slowly with his thumbs. He looked like he had walked out of a black and white movie. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you," he said. His voice was gravelly and warm. "No, it is fine," I said, shifting my cup. "I didn't see you there. I am Gideon Weller," he said. "I was your grandmother's attorney for many years." Recognition clicked. I had seen his name on Grandma's holiday card list, but I had never met him. Vivian spoke of him with a rare respect. She called him one of the last honest men in Virginia, which coming from her was high praise. "Oh, Mr. Weller," I said, "it is good to meet you. Grandma spoke of you often." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked tired. He looked worried. "She spoke of you too. Lucy," he said. "She told me you were the one who pays attention." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and withdrew a thick, yellow manila envelope. It was sealed, but I could see the bulk of documents inside. It looked old. The corners were slightly bent. "Vivian gave me instructions to hand this to you directly," he said, keeping his voice low. She was very specific. She said, "Give it to Lucy when the family is distracted." He held it out to me. I looked at the envelope. On the front, in Grandma's sharp, jagged handwriting, was my name, Lucy Hughes. "What is it?" I asked, reaching for it. "I believe it is her insurance policy." Gideon said, or at least, the original copy of it. "She wanted to make sure you had it in your hand before..." "Before what?" I asked, before I could touch the paper. A hand shot out from my left. It happened so fast I barely registered the movement. 1 second the envelope was in Gideon's hand, and the next it was gone. Reagan was standing there. She had moved with the speed of a striking cobra. She stood between me and Gideon, clutching the yellow envelope against her black silk dress. Her smile was tight, showing too many teeth. "Mr. Weller!" she exclaimed, her voice breathless and bright. "So wonderful of you to come. We were just wondering where you were." She looked down at the envelope in her hands as if she had just discovered it there by magic. "Oh, what is this?" she asked. "More paperwork?" "You know, Mom and I are handling all the administrative details. We don't want to burden poor Lucy with all this legal boring stuff. She has enough on her plate with her job." She turned the envelope over, ignoring the fact that my name was written on it. "Reagan," I said, stepping forward. "That is for me." Reagan didn't look at me. She looked at Gideon, her eyes challenging him. "It is just the old life insurance policy." "Isn't it?" she asked Gideon. "The one from the 70s? Gideon stiffened. "Ms. Hughes, your grandmother's instructions were..." "Oh, I know, Grandma." Reagan laughed, a brittle, tinkling sound. "She saved everything. Receipts from 1980, expired coupons, old policies. She was such a pack rat at the end. Wasn't she?" She ripped the top of the envelope open, a violent, tearing sound. She pulled out the stack of papers inside. She didn't read them. She flipped through them quickly, aggressively, barely glancing at the text. "See?" she said, looking at me with a pitying expression. "Just the old Great Plains mutual contract. I already spoke to the director there. This policy was converted years ago. These are just the voided originals. They are worthless." She said the word worthless with a strange amount of satisfaction. "Reagan, give that to me," I said, my voice rising. Reagan turned away from me. She took 2 steps toward the coffee station. There was a large, brushed steel trash can standing next to the table, filled with used napkins and empty sugar packets. She held the papers over the bin. "Reagan, don't," Gideon warned, taking a step forward. Reagan dropped them. The heavy thud of the paper hitting the bottom of the bin seemed to echo in the room, louder than the polite chatter of the guests. She dropped the yellow envelope on top of it, then she wiped her hands together, as if dusting off dirt. "There," she said, turning back to us with a bright, terrifying smile. "All tidied up. No need to clutter the house with old junk. We should focus on her memory, not her hoarding." My mother appeared at Reagan's elbow as if summoned by a silent alarm. "Is everything all right here?" Mom asked, her eyes darting between me and Gideon. "Reagan is throwing away Grandma's papers," I said, pointing at the trash can. Mom glanced at the bin, then at Reagan. She didn't look angry. She didn't look surprised. "Oh, Lucy, don't make a scene," Mom said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "It is a funeral. People are watching. Mr. Weller was trying to give that to me." I said, "Mr. Weller is just doing his job," Mom said, dismissing Gideon with a wave of her hand. "But Reagan is right. Grandma kept mountains of paper. We can't keep every receipt she ever touched. Let it go." Gideon looked at me. His face was pale. He opened his mouth to speak, to protest. But then he closed it. He looked at the crowd watching us. He realized, just as I did, that making a scene here would only make us look like the crazy ones. Reagan and Mom had the home field advantage. They controlled the narrative. "I am sorry, Ms. Hughes, Gideon said to me, his voice heavy with regret. I tried. He tipped his hat to me, gave Reagan a look of profound disappointment, and turned to walk away. I stood there, trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. I looked at the trash can. I could see the corner of the yellow envelope sticking out from under a used paper plate stained with cheesecake. Reagan stepped closer to me. She smelled of expensive perfume and wine. She put a hand on my shoulder. Her fingers dug in, just a little too hard. Don't be dramatic. Lucy, she whispered in my ear. It is just paper. It is over. Go get yourself a drink. You look washed out. She pulled back and looked at my face, and that was when I saw it. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't just the mean girl superiority she had perfected in high school. Her shoulders had dropped an inch. The tension around her mouth had vanished. The frantic energy that had been vibrating off her since she arrived was gone. She looked relieved. She looked like someone who had just defused a bomb with 1 second left on the clock. If the papers were truly worthless, why did she look like she had just survived a car crash? If it was just old junk, why was her pulse visible in the hollow of her throat? She patted my shoulder one last time, a dismissive, condescending pat, and turned back to Mom. They linked arms and walked away toward the guests, laughing softly at something, two beautiful women in mourning, leaving the invisible daughter by the trash can. I looked down at the bin again. Reagan thought she had thrown the problem away. She thought that because the paper was in the garbage, the truth was in the garbage, but she had forgotten who she was dealing with. She had forgotten that I am not the one who listens to the story. I am the one who checks the audit trail. Reagan didn't know it yet, but by throwing that envelope away, she hadn't ended the game. She had just given me the first piece of evidence I needed to win it. The ceiling fan in my bedroom clicks with a rhythm that usually puts me to sleep, but that night, it sounded like a clock counting down. I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, my body exhausted but my mind racing at 100 miles an hour. I could not shake the image of my sister's face. I replayed the moment at the funeral over and over again in my head. Reagan standing by the coffee station, the flick of her wrist, the heavy thud of the yellow envelope hitting the bottom of the metal bin. But it was not the action that kept me awake. It was the reaction. When Reagan dropped that envelope, her shoulders had slumped, her jaw had unclenched. For a split second, the mask of the grieving, perfect sister had slipped, and underneath it, I had seen pure, unadulterated relief. Why would you be relieved to throw away something worthless? If it was just old junk, as she claimed, she would have been annoyed. She would have been bored. She would have handed it to me with a sneer and said, "Here, you keep the trash." But she didn't. She destroyed it, or she thought she had. Vivian's voice drifted through my memory, clear and sharp as chipped ice. Don't let anyone help you too fast. Reagan had been so helpful. She had intercepted the lawyer. She had intercepted the paperwork. She had tidied up the mess. I looked at the digital clock on my nightstand. It was 4:15 in the morning. I threw the covers off. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew, with the kind of cold certainty that I usually reserved for spotting a fraudulent invoice, that I could not wait until morning. If Reagan was relieved, it meant she thought the threat was gone. And if she thought the threat was gone, it meant the threat was still in that trash can. I dressed quickly in jeans and a gray hoodie. I grabbed my car keys and a flashlight. I did not make coffee. I did not brush my hair. I just drove. The streets of Richmond were empty at that hour. The streetlights cast long, orange shadows across the pavement. I drove to Midlothian on autopilot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I pulled into the parking lot of the Maple Crest Memorial Chapel, the building was dark. Save for a few security lights near the rear entrance, my stomach twisted. I had a sudden, irrational fear that the garbage trucks had already come, that I was too late, that the evidence was already buried under tons of landfill. I parked my car away from the main lights and walked to the side door. I didn't have a plan to break in. I am an auditor, not a burglar. I operate within the rules, even when I'm bending them. I pressed the buzzer for the night staff. A minute passed, then 2. Finally, the door cracked open. A man in a blue maintenance uniform peered out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked to be in his 50s, with a name tag that read Earl. "Can I help you, miss?" Earl asked, sounding more confused than suspicious. I took a breath and put on my most professional, apologetic voice. The voice I used when I had to tell a trucking manager he had forgotten to sign a bill of lading. "I am so sorry to disturb you." "Earl," I said, "my name is Lucy Hughes. We held my grandmother's service here yesterday afternoon. Vivian Hughes." He nodded slowly. "Oh, yes. The big service in the East Chapel. I remember. I left something behind." I lied. Or rather, I didn't lie. I just reframed the truth. My sister accidentally threw away a packet of sentimental documents. She thought they were trash, but they are very important to me. I realized it as soon as I got home. I was hoping the cleaning crew hadn't emptied the bins yet. Earl looked at me, then looked at the dark parking lot. He saw a woman in a hoodie at 4:30 in the morning, looking desperate but polite. "We usually dump the bags into the main dumpster out back around 5. He said, "You caught me just before my rounds." Relief washed over me so strong it almost made my knees buckle. "Can I please check the bag from the reception hall?" I asked. "I won't make a mess. I just need to find that envelope." Earl hesitated, then sighed and opened the door wider. "Come on in, but make it quick. My manager comes in at 6. He led me through the silent, carpeted hallways to a utility room in the back. There were 3 large clear plastic bags sitting on the floor, tied shut with red knots. They were filled with the debris of grief, crumpled tissues, paper plates, plastic cups, and discarded programs. "That is the one from the reception area," Earl said, pointing to the bag on the left. "Thank you," I whispered. I knelt on the cold linoleum floor. I untied the knot. The smell hit me immediately. Stale coffee, sugar, and the cloying scent of wilting flowers. It was the smell of the funeral all over again. I dug through the trash. I moved aside a stack of napkins stained with lipstick. I pushed past a half-eaten chocolate chip cookie. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline. And then I saw it, buried near the bottom, wedged between a stack of paper cups and a discarded floral arrangement card, was the yellow manila envelope. It was stained with coffee on one corner. It was crumpled where Reagan had squeezed it, but it was there. I pulled it out as if I were pulling a diamond from the mud. I checked the contents. The papers were still inside. "I got it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I found it." Earl nodded, looking relieved that he wouldn't have to deal with a crying woman. "Good for you, miss." I thanked him again, perhaps too profusely, and practically ran back to my car. I locked the doors the moment I was inside. I didn't drive away immediately. I turned on the overhead dome light and laid the envelope on the passenger seat. I needed to know what was worth $2 million. I needed to know what my sister had tried to kill. I opened the metal clasp and slid the documents out. The paper was thick, high-quality bond. The kind they don't use anymore. The header read, "Great Plains Mutual Life Insurance Company." The date of issue was August 14th, 1972. I scanned the first page. It was a whole life legacy policy. I ran the numbers in my head. The premium payments were modest by modern standards, but they had been paid consistently for 54 years. Vivian had never missed a month, and because she had opted for the dividend reinvestment plan, something I spotted in Clause 12, the cash value had grown exponentially. It was not just an insurance policy, it was a fortress of compound interest. I turned the page to the beneficiary designation. There, typed in the faint ink of a 1970s typewriter, was the name Lucy Marie Hughes. My breath caught in my throat. She had named me. Not her son, not my mother, not Reagan, me, but I wasn't even born in 1972. I looked closer. There was an amendment attached to the front. Dated 34 years ago, the week I was born. She had updated it the moment I entered the world. But that was not what made my blood run cold. Behind the original policy documents, there were other papers, newer papers. They were crisp, white laser-printed forms that looked glaringly modern against the yellowed vintage bond. I picked them up. Request for change of beneficiary. The date on the first form was October 12, 2023. The name in the new beneficiary field was written in bold, confident black ink, Reagan Hughes. And at the bottom, there was a large, red ink stamp that looked like a violence committed against the paper. Rejected. Signature mismatch. I flipped the page. Another form. January 2024. New beneficiary. Reagan Hughes. Rejected. I flipped again. March 2025. New beneficiary. Reagan Hughes. Rejected. There were 6 of them. 6 times my sister had filled out this form. 6 times she had tried to erase my name and replace it with hers. I looked at the signature on the rejection forms. It was Vivian Hughes, but it looked wrong. It looked shaky in a way that was too deliberate. It was a caricature of an old person's handwriting. Reagan had forged them. She had sat somewhere, maybe at her kitchen table with a glass of wine, practicing our dying grandmother's signature so she could steal her legacy, and she had failed. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Reagan hadn't thrown the envelope away because the policy was worthless. She threw it away because it was evidence of her crime. If I had never seen this, I would never have known. The policy would have eventually been flagged by the insurance company. They would have contacted me, and Reagan would have played dumb. She would have said, "Oh, how wonderful for you. Lucy, Grandma must have kept it a secret, but by throwing it away, she was trying to sever the link. She wanted the original policy to disappear so that if the insurance company ever came calling, she could claim ignorance, or worse, she could claim that Grandma had meant to cancel it." My phone buzzed on the center console, startling me so badly I dropped the papers. I looked at the screen. The time was 6:10 in the morning. It was a text message from Reagan. My stomach turned over. Why was she awake? Why was she texting me at dawn the day after the funeral? I picked up the phone. The message was short, casual, and chilling. "Hey sis, hope you are sleeping in. Just wanted to remind you not to waste time on that junk of Grandma's. I am going to hire a shredding service to clear out the house next week. Love you." I stared at the screen. Don't waste time on that junk. She knew. She didn't know I was at the funeral home. She couldn't know that. But she knew that Gideon Weller had tried to give me that envelope. She knew I had seen her throw it away, and she was terrified that I might go back for it. The text wasn't a friendly reminder. It was a probe. She was poking me to see if I would react. She was trying to reinforce the narrative. It is junk. It is trash. Don't look at it. She was scared. I looked out the window at the gray light of dawn creeping over the horizon. The trees around the parking lot were silhouettes against the brightening sky. I felt a change inside me. For 34 years, I had been the little sister. I had been the one who nodded, the one who stepped aside, the one who accepted the scraps of attention my mother and Reagan left behind. I had accepted their version of reality because it was easier than fighting them. But looking at those rejected forms, looking at the clumsy forgery of the woman who was the only person to ever truly love me, something snapped. They didn't just want the money. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to take the one thing Vivian had left specifically for me. I picked up the envelope and placed it carefully on the passenger seat. I smoothed out the wrinkles. I am not going home. I said aloud to the empty car. If Reagan was awake and texting me at 6:10, she was making moves. If she was hiring a shredding service, she was trying to destroy more evidence. I couldn't let her get ahead of me. I pulled up the browser on my phone and typed in Great Plains Mutual Richmond Branch. The search result popped up. 104 East Franklin Street. Opens at 8:30 a.m. It was 6:15. I had 2 hours and 15 minutes to kill. I could go home, shower, change, and pretend this was a normal day. But I knew if I went home, Reagan might come over. She might try to help me again. She might try to verify that the junk was gone. No, I needed to be where she couldn't reach me. I needed to be at the front door of that insurance company the second they unlocked it. I started the engine. The car hummed to life, a steady, reliable sound. I looked at the envelope one last time. If my sister wants this to disappear so badly, I thought, gripping the steering wheel, then this is the most valuable thing I own. She threw it away to save herself. I am going to keep it to save myself. I put the car in gear and drove out of the funeral home parking lot. I didn't look back at the trash bins. I drove toward the city, toward the sunrise, and toward the truth that Reagan had tried so hard to bury. I was done reading the fine print from a distance. It was time to audit the whole account. I arrived at Great Plains Mutual exactly at 8:25 in the morning. I parked my sedan between a pristine white Lexus and a towering black SUV, feeling painfully aware of the mud splatters on my wheel wells and the coffee stain on my hoodie. I had not gone home to change. I could not risk it. I sat in the driver's seat for 5 minutes, watching the glass doors, waiting for the electronic lock to disengage. When the lights inside flickered from dim security mode to full brightness, I stepped out. The lobby was aggressively modern, all brushed steel, abstract art, and silence. It smelled of money, not dirty cash, but the clean, sterile scent of wealth that has been scrubbed and digitized. I walked up to the front desk. The receptionist looked at my jeans and hoodie with a practiced politeness that barely concealed her judgment. "I am here to inquire about a policy," I said, placing the yellow envelope on the marble counter. "My grandmother, Vivian Hughes, passed away this week. I am the beneficiary." She directed me to a cubicle in the back, to a senior policy specialist named Mara Keene. Mara was different from the receptionist. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with glasses that slid down her nose and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She did not look at my clothes. She looked at the envelope. She had the eyes of someone who preferred data to people, which immediately made me like her. I sat down and slid the papers across her desk. "My sister tried to throw these away," I said, deciding that the truth was the fastest route. "She said they were worthless. I need to know if she was right." Mara opened the envelope without a word. She handled the aged, yellowed paper with a surprising amount of reverence. She smoothed out the creases where Reagan had crumpled it. She turned to her computer and began typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She hit enter, then she stopped. I saw her spine stiffen. The ambient clicking of her mouse ceased. She leaned closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing behind her lenses. She typed something else, hit enter again, and then sat back in her chair, exhaling a long, slow breath. "Ms. Hughes," Mara said, her voice tight, "I need you to wait here. Do not leave this cubicle." "Is something wrong?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I need to get the director," she said. She stood up and walked quickly toward the frosted glass offices at the back of the floor. She did not look back. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at a stress ball on her desk shaped like a house. My mind raced. Had Reagan already canceled it? Was I too late? Had the shredding service been a metaphor for something digital? Then Mara returned. She was not alone. Behind her was a tall man in a charcoal suit who looked like he had not slept in a week, and a woman with a briefcase who looked like she could cut glass with her jawline. "Please come with us," the man said. "We should speak in private." They led me into a conference room enclosed in frosted glass. This was where the air felt different, heavier. The man introduced himself as Evan Caldwell, the branch director. The woman was Tessa Hart, corporate counsel. Mara sat at the laptop connected to the wall monitor. Evan sat opposite me. He clasped his hands on the table. His knuckles were white. "Ms. Hughes," Evan began, and I noticed a slight tremor in his voice. "We have reviewed the document you brought in. It matches the original entry in our archive system from 1972. "And?" I asked. "Is it valid?" "It is more than valid," Mara said from the side. She turned the monitor so I could see it. The screen was filled with rows of numbers, green columns stretching down the page. "Your grandmother purchased a participating whole life policy 54 years ago," Mara explained. her tone shifting into technical admiration. Most people cash these out when they retire, or they borrow against the cash value to pay for college or weddings. The interest eats away at the principal, and eventually, the policy collapses. She pointed to a column labeled Dividends. Vivian Hughes never touched a dime. Mara said she had a dividend reinvestment rider every year. The company paid her a share of the profits, and instead of taking the check, she used it to buy more paid-up insurance. It is the eighth wonder of the world. Compound interest over half a century. She looked at me, her eyes wide. She didn't just buy insurance, Ms. Hughes. She built a bunker. Evan cleared his throat. The value, he said. He nodded at Mara. Mara highlighted a figure at the bottom of the screen. The total death benefit payable to the beneficiary, Mara read, is $2,142,860. The room went silent. I stared at the number, the commas, the zeros. 2 million? I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the edge of the table to keep the room from spinning. My grandmother lived in a small brick house. She drove a 10-year-old sedan. She clipped coupons for tuna fish. She never bought new clothes. She did this. I whispered. She lived like that. For this? She lived like that so you wouldn't have to, Tessa Hart said softly. Her voice was less corporate now, more human. But why didn't she tell me? I asked. Because she knew her family. Mara said. Mara clicked a new tab on the screen. The header read, Changelog. This is the part that is going to be hard to see. Mara warned me. The screen filled with red text. We pulled the access logs when you gave us the policy number. Mara said. We found a pattern of activity starting 3 years ago. She pointed to the first entry, October 12th, 2023. We received a request to change the beneficiary to Reagan Hughes. Mara said, it was submitted by mail. The signature looked correct to the naked eye, but our level 1 scanner rejected it. The biometric pressure points were wrong. She scrolled down. January 2024. Another request. Rejected. March 2025. Rejected. 6 times. I said, repeating the number Tessa had mentioned earlier. My sister tried 6 times. Mara nodded. But look at the 4th attempt. She highlighted a row from 8 months ago. This one included a witness statement. Mara said, usually, a witness signature helps validate a request if the primary signature is shaky. It adds a layer of credibility. I leaned forward. I squinted at the scanned image of the document on the screen. Beside the forged signature of Vivian Hughes, there was a second signature on the line labeled Witness. It was a looping, elegant script I had seen on birthday cards and permission slips my entire life. Monica Hughes. The air left my lungs. My mother. It wasn't just Reagan. My mother had signed it. She had sat there, watched Reagan forge Grandma's name, and then she had picked up the pen and validated the lie. She helped her. I whispered. My voice sounded broken. Mara looked down at her keyboard. Evan looked at the wall. Your mother attested that she saw Vivian sign the document, Tessa said, stating the legal fact without emotion. That is fraud, but it is also why the system flagged it harder. Vivian had placed a specific instruction on her file 5 years ago. A legal lock. Evan interjected. He seemed eager to move the conversation away from the emotional betrayal and back to procedure. Your grandmother came in personally. She sat in this exact room. She told us that under no circumstances was the beneficiary to be changed unless she was physically present, with 2 notaries, and the session was video recorded. She knew. I said, she knew they would come for it. Yes, Evan said. She called it her firewall, because of that lock. Every time your sister and mother sent in a form, the system automatically blocked it, no matter how good the forgery was. I sat back, feeling a strange mix of devastation and vindication. They had tried everything, and Grandma had beaten them from her nursing home chair. So that is it, I said, wiping a tear from my cheek. They failed. The money is mine. I moved to stand up. Sit down. Ms. Hughes, Mara said. Her voice was sharp. I froze. We are not done, she said. Mara looked at Evan. Evan wiped a sheen of sweat from his upper lip. He gave a barely perceptible nod. Mara scrolled to the 5th entry on the list. The date was 4 months ago. This attempt was different. Mara said quietly, I looked at the screen. There was no red rejected stamp. Instead, the line was highlighted in yellow. Why is it yellow? I asked. Because for 12 minutes, Mara said, looking me dead in the eye. This request was active. The system accepted the change. For 12 minutes. Reagan Hughes was the legal beneficiary of this policy. How? I asked. You said there was a lock. You said she had to be here. She wasn't here, Evan said, his voice sounding like gravel. Then how? I demanded. Mara pointed to a string of code in the right-hand column. Auth override 04. Someone logged into the system internally. Mara said, someone sitting at a desk in this branch. They used a managerial override code to bypass the video requirement. They manually forced the change through the firewall. I looked at Evan. He was the director. It had to be him. But Evan was shaking his head. He looked terrified. It wasn't me, he said, anticipating my accusation. I swear to you. That code. It belongs to a regional manager profile, but the IP address was local. It was used from a terminal in the back office. Then why did it revert? I asked. Because Vivian Hughes was a genius, Tessa said. She had a secondary trigger. She set up a notification alert. If the beneficiary field was ever changed without the video file being uploaded simultaneously, the system was programmed to send an immediate fraud alert to the State Insurance Commission. Evan swallowed hard. The moment the override happened, the external alarm tripped. Whoever did it, whoever the insider was, they panicked. They saw the external alert go out, and they immediately reversed the transaction to cover their tracks. They changed it back to you before the State Commission could open the file. They got scared. I said, yes, Evan said. They tried to steal it, realized they had tripped a silent alarm, and put it back to save their own skin. I looked at the yellow line on the screen. 12 minutes. For 12 minutes, my sister and her accomplice had won. So there is someone here, I said, looking around the glass walls. Someone in this building who is working with my sister. Evan nodded. We don't know who. The login credentials were spoofed. But yes, your sister has a partner inside Great Plains Mutual. This explains the relief. I realized this explains why Reagan was so happy to throw the paper away. She didn't think she needed the paper because she had an insider. She must have thought they could try again, or that the insider could delete the records once the physical policy was destroyed. But by digging that envelope out of the trash, I had walked right into the middle of a crime scene. Evan leaned across the table. I'm going to file a formal fraud report, he said. I have to. The amount is too large, and the activity is too suspicious. But I noticed something. As he spoke, his eyes kept darting away from the column with the override code. He wasn't looking at the evidence of the insider. He was avoiding it. He is scared. I thought, he is the director. If there is a mole in his branch, he is responsible, or worse. I looked at his shaking hands. Is he just responsible? Or is he involved? He said it wasn't him, but he looked like a man who was watching a guillotine blade hoist into the air. Tessa Hart closed her folder. She picked up a silver pen and tapped it against the mahogany table. Ms. Hughes, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. I looked at her. You need to understand the gravity of what we are showing you, she said. This is not just a family dispute. Forgery is a felony, wire fraud is a federal crime, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. She looked at Evan, then back at me. Your sister threw that policy away because she thought the trail ended in the trash can. Tessa said, but this digital trail? This goes deeper. She leaned in. There is a reason the insider reversed the transaction. Ms. Hughes, they didn't just do it to hide. They did it because they are waiting. Waiting for what? I asked. Waiting for the physical file to be destroyed. Tessa said. Once the original policy, the one you have in your hand, is gone. The only record left is the digital one, and digital records can be altered if you have the right access codes. I gripped the yellow envelope in my lap. My knuckles turned white. They need this paper gone, I whispered. Exactly, Tessa said. As long as you hold that paper, their digital lie cannot stand. But if that paper disappears... She didn't finish the sentence. Evan stood up abruptly. I think that is enough for now, he said. His voice brittle. We will process the claim, but it will take time. We have to verify everything. He walked to the door, effectively ending the meeting. He wanted me out. He wanted to be alone with his panic. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I walked out of the conference room, clutching the envelope to my chest like a shield. Mara walked me to the lobby. She didn't say goodbye. She just gave me a look of solidarity and warning, and turned back to her computer. I walked out into the morning sun. The world looked the same as it had an hour ago, but everything had changed. I wasn't just a sister anymore. I was a witness. And as I unlocked my car, I replayed Tessa's words in my head. This could be a conspiracy. I looked back at the glass building. Somewhere in there, behind the blinds, someone was watching me. Someone who had typed my sister's name into the system. Someone who had panicked. And now, they knew I had the one thing that could send them to prison. I threw the envelope onto the passenger seat and locked the doors. The game hadn't just started. As Evan had said, the game was rigged, and I was the only one playing by the rules. I sat in my car outside the glass tower of Great Plains Mutual for 5 minutes, watching the morning traffic flow down East Franklin Street. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles white. The revelation inside that conference room, the 12 minutes where my sister had successfully stolen my inheritance, the existence of an insider, the terrified look on Evan Caldwell's face, had shifted the ground beneath my feet. I needed to talk to the one person who wouldn't lie to me. I pulled my phone out and dialed the number on the business card Gideon Weller had tried to give me at the funeral, before Reagan had intercepted us. He answered on the second ring. Gideon Weller. His voice was gravelly and calm. Mr. Weller, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This is Lucy Hughes. I found the envelope. There was a pause on the other end, a silence that felt heavy with expectation. You are calling me, Gideon said, his tone shifting from professional to something softer, almost proud. That means you went back to the funeral home. It means you looked in the trash. Yes, I said. And I just left Great Plains Mutual. I saw the override codes. Ah, Gideon said. So it has begun. You knew? I asked. Vivian knew, he corrected. Come to my office. Lucy, it is on West Main Street, the yellow Victorian with the wraparound porch. We have work to do. Gideon Weller's office was the antithesis of the Great Plains Mutual building, where the insurance office was steel, glass, and aggressive modernity. Gideon's law practice was oak, leather, and dust. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. The floors creaked under my feet as I walked down the hallway. A sound that felt comforting, like the house was breathing. Gideon met me at the door of his study. He was wearing the same gray suit he had worn at the funeral. His sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that were sharp and assessing. You look tired, he said. I haven't slept, I admitted. Good, he said, turning and walking behind his massive walnut desk. Sleep makes you soft. You need to be sharp for what comes next. He gestured for me to sit in one of the high-backed leather chairs. I sank into it, feeling small in the room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. You saw the director, Gideon stated. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. Evan Caldwell. He was shaken. Gideon allowed a small, grim smile to touch his lips. I imagine he was. Evan is a man who likes to control the variables. Vivian was a variable he could never quite calculate. Gideon reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound binder. He placed it on the desk between us. When people die, Lucy, they usually leave a will, Gideon said. A will is a wish list. It is a hope that people will behave decently. But your grandmother knew who she was dealing with. She knew that asking your sister to be decent was like asking a shark to be a vegetarian. He opened the binder. Vivian didn't leave a will, Gideon said. She left a strategic defense initiative. He slid a document toward me. It was titled The Hughes Family Living Trust, amended 2021. 5 years ago, Vivian came to me, Gideon explained. She had just been diagnosed with the early stages of her illness. She knew she was going to get weaker, and she knew that as she got weaker, your mother and sister would get bolder. I looked at the document. She knew they would try to take the money? She knew they would try to take everything, Gideon said. Vivian told me that Reagan had been borrowing from her purse since she was 16. Small amounts, $20 here, $50 there. But as Reagan's lifestyle got more expensive, the borrowing stopped being theft and started being coercion. He flipped the page. So, we created this, Gideon said. The 5-year defense plan. Defense plan? I repeated. Vivian moved every asset she owned into this trust, Gideon said. The house, the car, the savings accounts, and she made herself the primary trustee, with me as the successor, but the insurance policy, that was the bait. The bait? I asked, confused. Vivian knew she couldn't move the insurance policy into the trust without triggering a tax event, Gideon said. But more importantly, she wanted to see what they would do. She kept the policy in her name, but she placed the legal locks on it. She wanted to know if they would try to pick the lock. They did, I said. 6 times. We know, Gideon said. Every time they submitted a forged form, a copy was sent to the notification address on file. That address is here. This office. He pointed to a stack of files on the corner of his desk. I have copies of every attempt, Gideon said. I have the dates. I have the handwriting analysis. Vivian and I watched them do it. We sat in this room, drinking tea, and we filed every single crime they committed. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why didn't she stop them? Why didn't she call the police? Because Vivian wanted the big fish, Gideon said. He leaned forward, his expression hardening. 2 years ago, Vivian noticed something, Gideon said. She was reviewing her monthly statements. She never stopped auditing, even when she was sick, and she saw a query on her account. Someone from inside Great Plains Mutual had looked at her policy balance at 2 a.m. The insider, I whispered. Vivian didn't know who it was, Gideon said. But she knew that Reagan didn't have the technical skills to hack an insurance database. Reagan can barely work her own email. Someone was feeding her information. Someone was telling her exactly how much that policy was worth. Gideon opened a new section of the binder. Vivian realized that if she went to the police, then they would catch Reagan for attempted fraud. Maybe, Gideon said. But the insider? The person inside the bank? They would wipe their tracks. They would disappear. And Vivian, she hated unfinished business. So she waited, I realized. She waited, Gideon confirmed. She let them try. She let them fail. She let them get desperate. She told me, Gideon, when I die, they will panic. And when they panic, they will make a mistake. That is when we catch them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver key. He placed it on the desk. It made a sharp, metallic sound against the wood. This is the key to a safe deposit box at Heritage Union Bank, Gideon said. Box number 402. I looked at the key. It looked ordinary, but it felt heavy with implication. What is inside? I asked. The endgame, Gideon said. Vivian called it the evidence against the house. He sat back, steepling his fingers. 14 months ago, Vivian requested a private meeting with the branch director of Great Plains Mutual. Gideon said, Evan Caldwell. I said, Yes, Gideon said. She went into his office. She closed the door. She told me she wanted to look him in the eye. She wanted to see if he was a fool. A victim, or a predator. What happened? I asked. She never told me the details of the conversation, Gideon said. She said it was better if I didn't know, for my own legal protection. But when she came back to the car, I drove her that day, she was writing furiously in her notebook. She looked satisfied. Satisfied? Like she had confirmed a theory, Gideon said. She told me, "He is scared. Gideon, he is a man walking on a tightrope over a fire." She put that notebook in the safe deposit box the next morning. She told me that if anything happened to her, or if the policy was ever contested, I was to give you this key. I reached out and picked up the key. The metal was cold against my skin. "There is one more thing," Gideon said. He opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a receipt. It was a postal receipt for a certified package. 3 days before she died, Gideon said. Vivian had me mail a sealed package to the State Insurance Commission. It is addressed to the head of the Special Investigations Unit. My eyes widened. What is in the package? I don't know, Gideon said, but the cover letter states that the package is to be opened only upon the receipt of a formal complaint regarding policy number 72849. That is your policy. Lucy, I stared at him. The brilliance of it was staggering. She booby-trapped the investigation, I said. She ensured that if they tried to cheat you, and if you fought back, the state would already have the evidence waiting for them, Gideon said. The moment Evan Caldwell files that fraud report he promised you, the state commission will open Vivian's package. And whatever is in there, I suspect it connects the dots that Evan is trying very hard to hide. I thought about Evan Caldwell in the conference room. I thought about how he had avoided looking at the override code. I thought about how he had sweated when he talked about the ghost in the system. He knows, I said. Evan knows she knew. He suspects, Gideon corrected. He knows Vivian was sharp. He knows she asked dangerous questions 14 months ago. But he doesn't know about the safe deposit box, and he doesn't know about the package at the commission. Gideon closed the binder. He looked at me with an expression of profound seriousness. Lucy, he said, you have the policy. That is the sword. This trust. He tapped the binder. Is the shield. And that key. He pointed to the silver key in my hand. That is the ammunition. What do I do now? I asked. You go to Heritage Union Bank, Gideon said. You open that box. You see what Vivian found 14 months ago, because I have a feeling that what is in there isn't just about insurance. Vivian hinted that she had found a pattern of mistakes at that branch, a pattern of elderly clients losing their policies right before they died. My stomach turned. You mean they have done this before? That is what you need to find out, Gideon said. Vivian lived by evidence. She didn't want to just save her own money. She wanted to stop the machine. He stood up. The meeting was over. One word of warning. Lucy, Gideon said as he walked me to the door. I turned to look at him. The hallway was shadowed, and his face was grim. When you open that box, there is no going back, he said. Right now, Evan Caldwell is scared of losing his job. Right now, your sister is scared of losing a payday. But if that box contains what I think it contains, you are going to make them scared of losing their freedom. I am not afraid of them, I said. It wasn't entirely true. I was terrified. But I was also angry. The kind of cold, precise anger that makes you want to check every decimal point until you find the error. Good, Gideon said. Vivian said you were the tough one. She said Reagan had the bark, but you had the bite. He opened the door for me. The sunlight outside was blinding after the dim interior of his office. Go to the bank, Lucy, Gideon said, and keep your phone on. I have a feeling the other side is about to realize that the game has changed. I walked down the steps of the porch, clutching the silver key in my pocket. I felt the weight of it. It was light, physically, but it felt like I was carrying an anchor. My grandmother hadn't just left me money. She had left me a job. She had recruited me, posthumously, as the lead auditor in an investigation against her own family and a corrupt financial institution. I got into my car. I checked the time. It was 10:15. Heritage Union Bank was 4 blocks away. I started the engine. Vivian Hughes had spent 82 years playing by the rules. She had spent the last 5 years building a trap for the people who didn't. And now, I was the one who had to spring it. I pulled out onto West Main Street. I wasn't driving home. I was driving to the vault. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom. Heritage Union Bank was built in 1920, and it felt like a fortress designed to withstand a siege. The walls were thick granite, the floors were polished terrazzo, and the air was kept at a temperature that preserved fur coats and old money. I walked into the vault viewing room, a small, windowless chamber that smelled of dust and stale perfume. The bank officer, a silent woman with keys attached to her belt by a heavy chain, set the long metal box on the table. "Take as much time as you need," she said. The door clicked shut, sealing me in. I sat down and stared at the gray metal box. It was marked with the number 402. This was the endgame Gideon Weller had promised. This was the evidence against the house. I expected, perhaps foolishly, to find what people usually hide in safety deposit boxes. I expected diamond earrings, maybe a pearl necklace, or gold coins wrapped in velvet. I expected the sentimental debris of a long life. I lifted the lid. There was no jewelry. There was no gold. The box was packed tight with manila folders, color-coded tabs, and spiral-bound notebooks. It did not look like a grandmother's keepsake box. It looked like the evidence locker at a precinct. Right on top, resting on a blue folder, was a white envelope with my name on it. Lucy. I picked it up. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from a sudden, overwhelming sense of proximity. It felt like Vivian was standing in the corner of the room, watching me with those sharp, gray eyes. I opened the letter. The handwriting was firm, lacking the tremor that had plagued her in her final months. She must have written this years ago. "My dear Lucy, if you are reading this, it means 2 things have happened. First, I am dead. Second, you were smart enough to find Gideon and listen to him. You are going to want to cry because of the money. $2 million is a lot of noise, and it changes how people look at you. But do not cry for the money. The money is just math. You should tremble for the collusion. I did not build this box to protect my wealth. I built it to show you the faces of the people who claim to love you. You have an auditor's heart. Lucy, you trust what you can verify. So, verify this. Do not stop until you see the bottom of the well. The water is dirtier than you think. Love, Grandma." I put the letter down. My throat felt tight. Tremble for the collusion. I reached for the first folder. It was blue, labeled Attempt Logs. I opened it and gasped. It was a timeline, a forensic accounting of my sister's betrayal, documented in real time, October 12, 2023. Vivian's note. Reagan visited today, brought cookies, asked about estate planning 3 times. While I was in the bathroom, I heard her going through the desk in the study. Checked the papers later. The policy number was written on a napkin she left in the trash. January 14th, 2024. Vivian's note. Second attempt at forgery. This time, Monica drove her. I saw them in the driveway. Monica didn't come in. She stayed in the car. On the phone. Who was she talking to? The form arrived at Great Plains Mutual 2 days later. I flipped through the pages. It was agonizing. Vivian hadn't just known. She had watched them. She had sat in her chair, pretending to be frail, pretending to be senile, while she catalogued every step of their conspiracy. She noted the dates. She noted the times. She noted the specific lies they told her when they came to visit. Reagan says she needs money for a business venture. The venture is a lie. She is leasing a Mercedes. I closed the blue folder. I felt sick. My mother sitting in the car while Reagan raided the desk. It was so cold, so calculated. I reached for the next folder. It was red. The label read, The Inside Man. This was the folder Gideon had warned me about, the one connected to Evan Caldwell. I opened it. Inside were printouts of bank transfers and corporate registry documents. Vivian had done a deep dive. She had hired a private investigator. I saw the invoice for a firm called Beacon Trace Investigations stapled to the back. The report focused on a company called Apex Strategic Consulting, LLC. I scanned the documents. Apex Strategic Consulting was registered in Delaware, a state known for corporate anonymity, but the investigator had found a link. The mailing address for the company's registered agent was a P.O. box in Richmond, and the authorized signer for the company bank account was a man named Julian Vane. I didn't recognize the name, but Vivian had flagged it. She had drawn a red arrow from Julian Vane to a photograph clipped from a society page in the local newspaper. The photo showed a charity golf tournament from 3 years ago. 2 men were standing side by side, holding crystal trophies, smiling like sharks. The caption read, "Tournament winners, Evan Caldwell and his brother-in-law, Julian Vane." I felt a jolt of electricity run through me. Evan Caldwell hadn't used his own name. He had used his brother-in-law to set up a shell company. I turned the page. There were copies of wire transfers, small amounts. Initially, $500 here, $1,000 there. But then, the amounts grew, and the dates matched perfectly with the dates of the attempted beneficiary changes on Vivian's policy. January 16th, 2024. A wire transfer of $5,000 from Silverbridge Senior Navigators to Apex Strategic Consulting. Silverbridge Senior Navigators. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I looked at Vivian's notes in the margin. Reagan's employer paying Evan's shell company. Why? My mind raced. Reagan worked for Silverbridge. That was the nonprofit she always talked about. She said she was a liaison for elderly care. She said she helped old people navigate their finances. And here was proof that her employer, or at least an account connected to her work, was funneling money to the brother-in-law of the director of Great Plains Mutual. It was a payment loop. Reagan pays Evan. Evan overrides the system. Reagan gets the $2 million. But there was more. At the bottom of the stack, there was a printed email. It looked like it had been forwarded from a personal account to Vivian's email address. The subject line was, "Update on the old lady." The sender was R. Hughes, 88. My sister. The recipient was Director EC_private. I read the text. She is getting weaker. I checked the drawer. The original is still there. When can we run the override again? I need this done before she kicks it. I have the witness signature ready. And the reply. From Director EC_private. Do not run it again until the audit cycle clears on the 15th. And make sure the physical copy disappears the moment she passes. If the paper is gone, the digital record is the only truth. I can handle the system. But you have to handle the trash. I stared at the paper. You have to handle the trash. The funeral, the envelope, the relief on Reagan's face. It wasn't just a sister acting out of greed. It was a specific instruction from the director of the branch. Evan Caldwell had coached her. He had told her exactly what to do to commit a felony. I sat back in the metal chair, feeling the room spin. This was massive. This wasn't just about my grandmother's money anymore. This was a racketeering enterprise. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Shattering the silence of the vault, I jumped. I pulled it out. The screen showed an unknown number. Usually, I let unknown numbers go to voicemail, but Gideon had told me to keep my phone on. "Hello?" I answered, my voice echoing slightly in the small room. "Is this Lucy Hughes?" A woman's voice, sharp, professional, authoritative. "Yes," I said. "This is Detective Nora Delgado with the Financial Crimes Unit of the Richmond Police Department," the voice said. "I am contacting you regarding a fraud report filed this morning by Great Plains Mutual Life Insurance." My heart hammered. Evan had actually done it. He had filed the report. "I am aware of the report," I said, trying to sound like the auditor I was, rather than the terrified woman I felt like. "I need to speak with you, Ms. Hughes," Detective Delgado said. "I am looking at the preliminary documents Mr. Caldwell submitted. He is claiming that there were external attempts to access the account. External? I asked. He told me it was internal. He told you that? Delgado's tone shifted. She became sharper. That is not what is in his written statement. In his statement, he claims a hacker compromised the system using credentials stolen from a former employee. I laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. He is lying. That is a strong accusation, Delgado said. I have proof, I said, looking at the red folder in front of me. I am at Heritage Union Bank right now. I have evidence that links Evan Caldwell directly to the fraud. There was a pause on the line. Ms. Hughes, Delgado said slowly, stay where you are. I am coming to you. But before I get there, I need to ask you something. Does the name Silverbridge Senior Navigators mean anything to you? I looked at the wire transfer receipt in the folder. Yes, my sister works there. Correction, Delgado said. Your sister worked there. We have been investigating Silverbridge for 6 months. It is a shell organization. They target vulnerable seniors, offer to organize their assets, and then slowly siphon off funds. We have 12 victims so far. Petty theft, mostly, jewelry, small savings accounts. Hard to prove. Reagan, I whispered. Your sister is a person of interest in multiple open cases, Delgado said. But we could never find where the money was going. It seemed to vanish. But if you are telling me she is connected to a bank director... She is paying him, I said. My voice steady now. I have the receipts. She was paying him to override the insurance policies of her clients. Policies? Delgado asked. Plural? I don't know, I said. But my grandmother's policy was worth $2 million. If they have done this before, then this is not just theft, Delgado finished for me. This is a machine. I looked at the photo of Evan Caldwell smiling with his brother-in-law. Detective, I said. Mr. Caldwell told me this morning that the game had just begun. I think he was right. Sit tight. Ms. Hughes, Delgado said. Do not leave that bank, and do not trust anyone who walks through that door unless they are wearing a badge. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. I looked at the contents of box 402. I thought about the title of the story my life had become. This insurance policy should have been thrown away. That was what Reagan thought. That was what Evan thought. They thought the paper was the problem. But looking at the wire transfers, the emails, and the photo of the smiling director, I realized the truth. Reagan was just a pawn. She was the face they used to trick the old people. She was the one who held the hand and stole the purse. But Evan Caldwell? He was the architect. He was the one who turned a nursing home scam into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. I picked up the receipt that showed the transfer of $5,000. I wasn't just holding my inheritance. I was holding the thread that was going to unravel the entire sweater. I put the papers back in the box, but I kept the red folder out. I held it against my chest. Vivian was right. Collusion was terrifying. But as I sat there, waiting for the police, I realized something else. They should have been more afraid of the auditor. The sun was beginning to dip below the tree line when I walked out of the police precinct. I had spent 3 hours with Detective Delgado, handing over copies of the wire transfers and the emails Vivian had preserved in the safe deposit box. My head was throbbing, a dull, rhythmic ache behind my eyes that screamed for caffeine and silence. I walked toward my car, fishing my keys from my pocket. The parking lot was public, filled with marked cruisers and the everyday sedans of detectives. But as I approached my vehicle, I saw a figure leaning against the driver's side door. It was Reagan. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, despite the fading light, and a trench coat that looked like something a spy would wear in a bad movie. She was trying to look composed, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She was chewing the inside of her cheek, a nervous tic she had had since we were teenagers. "We need to talk," Reagan said. Her voice was not the high-pitched, performative instrument she used at parties. It was low and flat. "I have nothing to say to you," I said. Stopping 10 feet away, I kept my hand on the pepper spray attached to my keychain. It felt ridiculous to fear my own sister. But after what I had read in the vault, I didn't know who she was anymore. "Don't be like that. Lucy," she said, pushing off the car and taking a step toward me. She lowered her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were bloodshot. "I know you went to the bank. I know you talked to the insurance people. And?" I asked. "And I think we are letting this get out of hand," she said. She forced a smile. It was a terrifying expression. "Look, I get it. You are mad. You think I tried to cut you out. But you don't understand the pressure I was under. Mom's house needs repairs. My car lease is up. I was just trying to manage the family assets." "Family assets," I repeated. "Is that what you call forging Grandma's signature 6 times? Reagan flinched. "Okay, fine. I took a shortcut. But Lucy, look at the big picture. $2 million. If we fight over this, the lawyers will take half. The taxes will take the rest. Why don't we just fix it?" She stepped closer, her voice turning syrupy sweet. "Split it," she whispered. 50-50. I will tell the insurance company it was a misunderstanding. I will sign whatever waiver they need. We take the payout. You get $1 million. I get $1 million. We walk away. No police, no drama. I looked at her. She was offering me half of my own money to buy my silence. "You can't fix this, Reagan," I said. "It is already in the system." "I can fix it," she insisted. "I know people. I can make the flags go away." "You mean Evan Caldwell can make them go away?" I asked. The name hit her like a physical slap. Her face went pale, draining of color so fast it looked painful. She took a step back, her heel catching on the asphalt. "I don't know who that is," she said too quickly. "Stop it," I said. "I saw the emails. Reagan, Director EC Private. I saw the wire transfers from Silverbridge. I know about the override codes." Reagan's fear vanished, replaced instantly by a cold, venomous anger. Her face twisted into a snarl. "You little rat," she hissed. "You have been digging through things you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that you are going to prison." "I am not going anywhere," she spat. "And if you try to pin this on me, I will destroy you. You think the police will believe you? The quiet, weird sister who was obsessed with money? I will tell them you manipulated Grandma. I will tell them you forced her to sign that policy when she was on medication. I have witnesses. Lucy, I have Mom." "Go ahead," I said. "Tell them." I unlocked my car. "This isn't over," she screamed as I opened the door. "You are making a mistake. You are going to ruin this family." I slammed the door and locked it. As I drove away, I saw her standing in the rearview mirror, furiously typing on her phone, warning him. I thought, she is warning Evan. I was halfway back to my apartment when my phone rang. It was my mother. I debated letting it go to voicemail. I wanted to go home, lock my door, and sleep for a week. But I knew that if I didn't answer, they would just show up at my apartment. I needed to end this on my terms. "Hello, Mother," I answered. "Lucy, darling." Her voice was breathless, trembling with a mixture of anxiety and forced cheerfulness. "Reagan just called me. She is very upset. She says you two had a misunderstanding in the parking lot." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "Oh, hush now," Mom said. "Listen, I have a roast chicken in the oven. I made those potatoes you like, the ones with the rosemary. Come over for dinner, just the 3 of us. We need to sit down as a family and clear the air. No lawyers, no insurance agents, just us." "I don't think that is a good idea," I said. "Please, Lucy." Her voice cracked. It was a genuine sound of distress, perhaps the first real emotion she had shown in years. "I am your mother. I am asking you to come home. We can't let money tear us apart. Please." I gripped the steering wheel. I knew it was a trap. I knew it was an ambush designed to guilt me into submission, but I also knew that I needed them in one room. I needed to see their faces when the final card was played. "Okay," I said. "I will be there in 30 minutes." The house in Chesterfield looked exactly the same as it always did. The lawn was manicured, the porch light was on, It was the picture of suburban respectability. It was hard to believe that inside, two women were plotting how to stay out of federal prison. I walked in. The smell of roast chicken and rosemary filled the hallway. It was a smell from my childhood, a smell that used to mean safety. Now, it smelled like a lie. Mom met me at the door. She hugged me tightly. She felt frail. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "Reagan is in the dining room. Please, Lucy, be gentle. She is fragile right now." I didn't say anything. I walked into the dining room. Reagan was sitting at her usual spot at the head of the table. She had changed out of the trench coat into a soft, cream-colored sweater. She had fixed her makeup. She looked like the victim. She looked like the grieving granddaughter who had been misunderstood. "Hi, Lucy," she said softly. Not meeting my eyes, I sat down opposite her. Mom brought in the platter of chicken and placed it in the center of the table. She poured wine for Reagan and water for me. "Now," Mom said, clapping her hands together lightly as she sat down. "Let's eat, and let's talk, like civilized people." We served ourselves in silence. The clinking of silverware against china sounded like sword fighting. "I want to apologize," Reagan said suddenly. She put her fork down and looked at me with wide, shimmering eyes. "For the funeral, throwing the papers away. It was a lapse in judgment. I was just so overwhelmed with grief. Lucy, I saw all that paperwork and I just snapped. I didn't mean to hurt you. I certainly didn't know it was valuable." "See?" Mom said, smiling anxiously. "She made a mistake. We all make mistakes when we are grieving. I remember when your father died. I threw away a whole box of tax returns. It happens." "Reagan just wants to make it right," Mom continued. "She suggested a fair split. I think that is very generous of her, considering she did all the work caring for Grandma these last few years." I cut a piece of potato. I didn't eat it. I just looked at it. "Caring for her?" I asked. "You mean the 15-minute visits once a month?" "Lucy," Mom warned. "Don't start." "I am not starting anything," I said. "I am just listening to the story." "It is not a story," Reagan said, her voice hardening slightly. "I am trying to be the bigger person here. I am offering you $1 million. Why are you being so difficult?" "Because you are lying," I said calmly. "Excuse me?" Reagan snapped. I looked up. I locked eyes with her. "If the policy was worthless," I asked, "why did you throw it away so fast?" The room went silent. Reagan blinked. "I told you, I was stressed." "No," I said. "People who are stressed drop things on a table. They hand them to someone else. They don't snatch them from a lawyer's hand and bury them in a trash can like they are disposing of a murder weapon. You threw it away like it was a burning cigarette. Reagan, you threw it away because it burned you to hold it." "You are being paranoid," Reagan said. Picking up her wine glass, her hand was shaking. "And you?" I said, turning to Mom. "You stood right there and watched her. You told the guests to ignore it. You said, 'Don't make a scene.' Why? Why was it so important that no one looked in that envelope?" "I just wanted a dignified funeral," Mom cried. "I didn't want people rummaging through garbage." I reached into my bag. I pulled out a folder. It wasn't the original documents. I wasn't stupid enough to bring those here. It was a set of photocopies I had made at the bank. I slid the papers across the table. They fanned out over the roast chicken. "What is this?" Reagan asked. 6 attempts, I said. 6 times you forged her name." Reagan stared at the papers. She didn't touch them. "And this one," I said, pointing to the 4th page. "This one is special." I looked at Mom. "That is your signature. Mom, witness, you signed a legal document stating that you saw Grandma sign this. But Grandma was in the hospital that day. I checked the logs." Mom's face crumbled. She put her hand over her mouth. I just signed what Reagan gave me," Mom stammered. "She said Grandma had already signed it. She said it was just a formality." "A formality?" I asked. "Stealing $2 million is a formality?" "It wasn't stealing," Reagan shouted. Slamming her hand on the table, the wine glass tipped over. spilling red liquid across the white tablecloth like a blood stain. "It was our money! Grandma was hoarding it. She didn't need it. I have debts. Lucy, I have people calling me." "So you decided to commit a felony," I said. "It is not a felony if the family agrees," Reagan yelled. "It is just paperwork, and it would have worked if you hadn't been such a nosy little creep." "The police disagree," I said softly. Reagan froze. "What?" "I was with Detective Delgado this afternoon," I said. "I gave her everything, the forgeries, the wire transfers." "Wire transfers?" Reagan whispered. "The payments from Silverbridge to Apex Strategic Consulting," I said. "To Evan's brother-in-law." Reagan looked like she had been shot. She slumped back in her chair. "You gave them the receipts?" she breathed. "I gave them everything," I said. "They know about the override. They know about the 12 minutes the policy was in your name. They know Evan Caldwell logged in from his terminal." "No," Reagan said, shaking her head. "No. He said it was untraceable. He promised me." "He lied," I said. "Just like you lied to the old people at Silverbridge." Reagan's eyes darted around the room, as if looking for an exit. "I didn't steal from them. I just moved assets. It was a fee, a management fee." "It was theft," I said. "And now it is over." "You have to call them back," Mom pleaded, grabbing my arm. Her grip was desperate. "Lucy, you have to tell the police it was a mistake. Tell them you made it up. You can't let them take your sister." "I can't stop them," I said. "The investigation is already open." "You did this!" Reagan screamed. She stood up, her chair clattering backward onto the floor. "You jealous little bitch! You did this to ruin me because you can't stand that I am the one everyone loves." "Everyone?" I asked. "Or just the people you haven't scammed yet?" "I didn't do it alone," Reagan shrieked. The words exploded out of her. "I didn't know how to work the system. I just did what I was told. He told me what to write. He told me when to send it. He said the system was taken care of." The silence that followed was absolute. Reagan stood there, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with horror. She had just confessed. She had just admitted conspiracy. "He?" I asked quietly. "Evan," she sobbed. "Evan Caldwell. He came to me. He found me at the charity gala. He knew about Grandma's policy before I did. He said it was sitting there, just gathering dust. He said we could split it. He said he needed a payout to cover some bad loans. He used me." She collapsed onto the floor, burying her face in her hands. "I am the victim here," she wailed. "He made me do it." I looked at my mother. She was sitting stone still, tears streaming down her face. "You knew," I said to Mom. "I didn't know about Evan," Mom whispered. "I just knew Reagan needed help. I just wanted to help my daughter." "I am your daughter too," I said. "But you," Mom looked at me, her eyes sad and empty. "You are strong, Lucy. You don't need help, Reagan. She needs so much. Not reading the fine print is a choice, Mom," I said, standing up. "You chose to look away, and now, you have to look at this." I pointed to the mess on the floor, the spilled wine, the scattered papers, the sobbing sister. "I am leaving," I said. "Where are you going?" Mom cried. "Home," I said. "To my boring, quiet life." I turned to walk away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a long, sustained vibration. I pulled it out. It was a text message from Detective Nora Delgado. "We got the judge to sign off. The digital forensics came back from the state commission package. It is a slam dunk. We have issued warrants." I looked at the second line of the text. "Arresting Reagan Hughes and Evan Caldwell tonight. Do not engage." I looked down at my sister, who was curled in a ball on the rug, weeping about how unfair her life was. "Reagan," I said. She looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. "You might want to clean yourself up," I said. "You have company coming." Who? She asked, sniffing. The consequences, I said. The arrest happened on a Tuesday, 3 days after the disastrous dinner at my mother's house. It did not happen quietly. I was not there to see it, but the entire neighborhood of Chesterfield saw it. They saw the unmarked sedans pull into the driveway. They saw the uniformed officers flank the front door. And they saw my sister, Reagan Hughes, led out in handcuffs. She was not wearing her designer trench coat or her perfectly tailored dress. The footage that aired on the 6 o'clock news showed her in sweatpants and a frantic, unwashed bun, shielding her face from the camera glare with a handcuffed hand. The local media devoured it. It was the perfect storm for a slow news cycle in Richmond. You had a beautiful woman, a respected elderly matriarch who had just passed away, and a staggering sum of $2.1 million. The headlines wrote themselves. Sister Act. Local woman charged in $1 million insurance fraud. The price of greed. Chesterfield socialite arrested. My face was blurred in the reports, referred to only as the estranged sibling or the whistleblower. But Reagan was everywhere. Her high school yearbook photo, her headshot from Silverbridge Senior Navigators, and the mugshot where she looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. I sat in my apartment with the blinds drawn, watching the world dissect my family tragedy. It felt surreal. It felt like I was watching a true crime documentary about strangers, but the dominoes were falling exactly as Gideon Weller had predicted. 48 hours after Reagan was taken into custody, the second shoe dropped. Evan Caldwell was arrested at his country club. The police didn't let him finish his round of golf. They walked him off the 9th green in front of half the Richmond business elite. The charges against him were heavier than Reagan's: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit identity theft, and thanks to the digital trail Vivian had preserved. A special enhancement for crimes against the elderly. Great Plains Mutual released a statement within the hour. They used words like rogue employee and isolated incident and zero tolerance. They severed ties with him so fast, the ink on the press release was barely dry. They were terrified. They knew that if the public started thinking their entire system was rigged, the bank runs would start by Friday. My phone rang incessantly. Reporters, lawyers, friends I hadn't spoken to in 10 years who suddenly wanted to know how I was doing. I ignored them all. Except for one call. It was Thursday evening. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across my living room floor. My phone buzzed with my mother's number. I picked it up. "Hello, Mom," I said. "You have to stop this," she said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was hoarse, broken, stripped of all its usual polish. "Lucy, please. They are talking about 10 years. They are saying Reagan could go away for 10 years. "I know," I said. "I read the indictment." "You can fix it," she pleaded. "Call the district attorney. Tell him you were mistaken. Tell him you gave him the wrong papers. Tell him you want to withdraw your statement." I closed my eyes. I felt a wave of exhaustion so heavy it almost crushed me. "Mom," I said gently, "it doesn't work like that. It is not my case anymore. It is the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Reagan Hughes. Even if I recanted everything today, they have the bank records, they have the IP logs, they have the wire transfers." "But if the victim refuses to cooperate," she started. "I am not the only victim," I cut her off. "There are 12 other people, Mom. 12 elderly clients at Silverbridge who lost their savings because Reagan and Evan decided to play God with their accounts. I can't withdraw their pain." There was a silence on the line, a long, suffocating silence. "She is your sister," Mom whispered. "I know," I said, "and that is the only reason I'm not holding a press conference right now. I am staying quiet. Mom, that is the only mercy I can give her." I hung up. I unplugged the phone. The following morning, I received a call from the assistant district attorney, a sharp-voiced woman named Sarah Jenkins. She told me that the evidence from the safe deposit box was impeccable. She asked if I wanted to file a separate civil suit for emotional distress or punitive damages. "We could freeze her assets," Jenkins said. "We could go after the mother, too. for her role as a witness. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the empty chair where Vivian used to sit when she visited. "No," I said. "I don't want their money. I just want the truth on the record." "We will get that," Jenkins promised. "We are going to trial unless they plead out, and looking at what you gave us, they will plead." I thought that was the end of it. I thought I would just wait for the court dates and the sentencing hearings, but on Monday morning, Gideon Weller called me. "Lucy," he said, his voice grave, "I just got a call from Marcus Thorne." "Who is Marcus Thorne?" I asked. "He is Reagan's new defense attorney," Gideon said. "He is expensive, he is good, and he is surprisingly ethical. He wants a meeting." "A settlement?" I asked. "I already told the DEA I don't want a civil suit." "Not a settlement," Gideon said. "Reagan wants to talk to you. Thorne says she has information regarding the final days of Vivian's life, information she has not shared with the police yet." "Why would she tell me and not the police?" "Because," Gideon said, pausing for effect, "she says she has something that belongs to you, something Vivian gave her." My heart skipped a beat. "I will pick you up in an hour," Gideon said. Marcus Thorne's office was in downtown Richmond, in a building that smelled of old leather and expensive cologne. Gideon walked beside me, his presence a comforting shield against the legal machinery. We were ushered into a conference room. Reagan was already there. I almost didn't recognize her. She was wearing a gray sweater that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair, usually a curtain of gold, was pulled back in a severe ponytail that highlighted the sharp angles of her face. She looked gaunt. The circles under her eyes were dark purple bruises. She was out on bail, wearing an ankle monitor that bulked awkwardly under her jeans. She didn't look like the villain. She looked like a ruin. Marcus Thorne sat beside her. He was a man in his 50s with silver hair and a face that suggested he had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Hughes," Thorne said to me. "My client requested this meeting. This is off the record. Nothing said here will be used in the criminal proceedings. We just want to facilitate a transfer." I sat down. Gideon sat next to me, placing his briefcase on the table. I looked at Reagan. She was staring at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. "You wanted to see me," I said. Reagan looked up. Her eyes were dull. The fire was gone. The arrogance was gone. "I wanted to tell you," she said, her voice raspy, "about Evan." "I know about Evan," I said. "I gave the police the emails." "You know what he did," Reagan said, "but you don't know how he did it. You don't know how he got inside my head." She took a shaky breath. "I met him at the gala 3 years ago," she said. "I was complaining about money. I always complained about money. And he listened. He told me that the system was broken. He told me that people like Grandma, people who hoard wealth in old accounts, were the problem." "He groomed you," Gideon said softly. Reagan nodded. "He taught me the language. He taught me words like beneficiary designation and override authorization. I didn't know what any of it meant. Lucy, I swear, I thought it was just loopholes. He said it was a victimless crime because the insurance companies have insurance. It wasn't victimless," I said. "You stole from real people." "I know," she whispered. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. "I know that now. But back then, he made me feel smart. He made me feel like I was part of the club. He promised me that if I just got the physical paper to disappear, his code would handle the rest." She looked at me, her expression pleading. "That is why I threw the envelope away," she said. "He told me, the moment the paper hits the trash, the digital reality becomes the only reality. He said it was a magic trick. Make the object vanish, and the audience believes the illusion." "But the audience was an auditor," I said. Reagan let out a short, wet laugh. "Yeah, he didn't count on that. He told me you were just a secretary. He said you were nobody." "He was wrong," I said. "He was," Reagan agreed, "and I was wrong to listen to him." She reached down into her bag, which was sitting on the floor. "But that is not why I asked you here," she said. "I asked you here because of the last time I saw Grandma." I stiffened. "You visited her?" 2 weeks before she died," Reagan said. "I went to the nursing home. I was going to try one last time to get her to sign the form. I had the witness line blank. I was going to beg her." "And?" I asked. "I walked in," Reagan said. "And she was sitting in her chair, facing the door. It was like she was waiting for me. She didn't say hello. She just looked at me with those scary gray eyes and said, 'I know why you are here, Reagan.'" Reagan shivered. "She told me to put the papers away." Reagan continued. "She said, 'You will never get this money, child. Not because I don't love you, but because money would destroy you faster than you can spend it.'" "She was right," I said. "Then she handed me this," Reagan said. She pulled a white envelope out of her bag. It was sealed, on the front, in Vivian's handwriting. It said, "For Lucy," underneath my name. There was an instruction written in smaller letters. "To be delivered only when you dare to speak the truth." I stared at the envelope. "She gave this to you?" I asked, incredulous. "To give to me?" "I asked her why she didn't just give it to you herself," Reagan said. "And she said, 'Because Reagan needs to do one honest thing before the end. This is her chance.'" Reagan slid the envelope across the table. "I almost burned it," Reagan admitted. "After the funeral, when everything started falling apart. I wanted to burn it. I thought it might be another will, or more evidence. But then, the police came, and the handcuffs, and I sat in that cell, and I realized that everything she said was true. The money did destroy me. The lies destroyed me." She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw my sister, not the star, not the golden child, just a flawed, broken human being who was terrified of the dark. "I want to do one honest thing," Reagan whispered. "Here." I reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavy, though it was only paper. "What is in it?" Gideon asked. "I don't know," Reagan said. "It is sealed. I didn't open it." I looked at the seal. It was unbroken. I looked back at Reagan. "Thank you." It was a strange thing to say to the woman who had tried to rob me, but I meant it. She could have destroyed this. She could have hidden it, but she had brought it here, to this cold room, to complete the circuit Vivian had built. "I am going to plead guilty," Reagan said. Standing up, her legs looked unsteady. "Marcus worked out a deal. I am going to testify against Evan. I am going to tell them everything about the scheme. I will probably go to prison for 3 to 5 years." "That sounds appropriate," Gideon said, his voice neutral. Reagan nodded. She looked at me one last time. "I am sorry, Lucy," she said. "Not for the money, but because I never saw you. I never looked at you. I just looked past you." "I know," I said. "Vivian saw you," Reagan said. "She always saw you." She turned and walked out of the room. Followed by her lawyer, the door clicked shut, leaving Gideon and me alone in the silence. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. For Lucy. I ran my thumb over the ink. "She wrote the ending," I whispered. "She did," Gideon said. "Vivian knew that eventually. The pressure would break Reagan. She knew that if Reagan was stripped of everything, the money, the reputation, the freedom, she might finally find her conscience, and she trusted that if that happened, Reagan would deliver this." "And if she hadn't?" I asked. "If Reagan had burned it?" "Then you would have won the legal case," Gideon said. "But you would have lost the sister completely. Vivian was gambling on redemption. Lucy, even for Reagan." I held the envelope up to the light. I couldn't see through it. "Do you want to open it?" Gideon asked. "Not here," I said. "Not in a lawyer's office." I stood up. I felt a sense of closure that the court verdicts would never give me. The money was safe. The bad guys were caught. But this was the final message. "I need to go to the cemetery," I said. Gideon nodded. "I will drive you." As we walked out of the building, I clutched the envelope against my chest. The drama was over. The cold opens, the cliffhangers, the plot twists. They were all done. All that was left was the truth. I thought about what Evan Caldwell had said in that glass room. You thought your sister throwing the paper away was the end. He was wrong. My sister handing me the paper was the end, and now I was ready to read the final line. The Chesterfield County Courthouse is a building designed to make you feel small. The ceilings are too high, the benches are too hard, and the air is always recycled, carrying the faint metallic taste of anxiety. On the day of the sentencing, the room was packed. The local press had turned my family's tragedy into a serialized drama, and everyone wanted to see the season finale. I sat in the third row, directly behind the prosecution table. Gideon Weller sat next to me. He did not say much, but his presence was a steadying weight, like a paperweight on a stack of loose documents. My sister, Reagan, sat at the defense table. She was wearing a simple gray blouse and black slacks. Her hair was clean but unstyled. She kept her head down, staring at the grain of the wood table as if she were trying to memorize it. She looked younger than I had ever seen her, stripped of the armor of expensive clothes and false confidence. On the other side of the aisle sat Evan Caldwell. The former director of Great Plains Mutual looked like a man who had aged 20 years in 20 days. His suit hung loosely on his frame. He did not look at Reagan. He did not look at me. He stared straight ahead at the judge's bench, his jaw set in a grim line of resignation. They had both pleaded guilty. There was no dramatic trial, no surprise witnesses, no last-minute objections. The evidence Vivian had compiled in Safety Deposit Box 402 was so overwhelming, so meticulous, that their lawyers had advised them to take the deal. The digital logs, the wire transfers, the emails. It was a mathematical proof of guilt. Judge Harmon, a woman with a face carved from granite, shuffled the papers on her bench. We are here for the sentencing in the matter of the Commonwealth versus Reagan Hughes and Evan Caldwell, she said. Her voice boomed without a microphone. Before the sentences were read, the prosecutor stood up. He was a young man, sharp and eager, but he held a piece of paper in his hand with a strange reverence. Your Honor, he said, the victim, Vivian Hughes, is not here to speak for herself. However, she anticipated this day. She left a victim impact statement in the care of her attorney, to be read in the event of a conviction. A ripple of murmurs went through the courtroom. Reagan flinched. Evan closed his eyes. The prosecutor unfolded the paper. It was not typed. It was a photocopy of a handwritten page, magnified so he could read it. These are the words of Vivian Hughes, he announced. He began to read, to the court and to those standing before it. I am not writing this to ask for vengeance. Vengeance is a waste of time, and I never liked wasting time. I am writing this to clarify the record. For 50 years, I saved my money. I did not save it to buy power. I saved it to buy safety. I grew up in a time when women were not allowed to have their own bank accounts without a husband's signature. I learned early that financial independence is the only shield against a cruel world. To my granddaughter, Reagan, you saw my money not as a shield, but as a shortcut. You thought I was hoarding it because I was mean. You never understood that the money was not the point. The discipline was the point. You tried to steal the harvest without ever planting the seed. To Mr. Caldwell, you are a man entrusted with the security of others. You looked at an old woman and saw prey. You thought I was feeble. You thought I would not notice the digital fingerprints you left on my life. You were wrong. I saw you. I watched you turn my own family against me. I forgive you both, because holding on to anger is bad for the heart. But please understand this. Forgiveness does not erase consequences. You broke the law. You broke the trust. And now, you must pay the bill. The prosecutor lowered the paper. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a prayer. I looked at Reagan. She was weeping silently, her shoulders shaking. She wasn't performing for the cameras this time. She was crying because the voice from the grave had stripped her bare. Judge Harmon let the silence hang for a long moment before she spoke. "The court accepts the pleas," she said. Reagan stood up first. "Reagan Hughes," the judge said, "for the charges of forgery, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft, this court sentences you to 4 years in the state correctional facility, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $45,000 to the Silver Bridge victims." Reagan nodded. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just whispered, "Yes, Your Honor." Then it was Evan's turn. "Evan Caldwell," the judge said, her voice hardening. "You held a position of public trust. You used your knowledge of the banking system to exploit the vulnerable for the charges of money laundering, racketeering, and elder abuse. This court sentences you to 7 years in federal prison." Evan swayed slightly, gripping the table. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "you are permanently barred from working in the financial services industry in any capacity. You are ordered to pay restitution of $200,000, and all assets connected to Apex Strategic Consulting are hereby seized." The gavel came down. Bang! It was a sharp wooden sound that signaled the end of the narrative. I watched the bailiffs move in. They handcuffed Reagan. She looked back at me as they led her away. Her eyes were red, swollen, and sad. I gave her a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an acknowledgement. She was finally paying the bill. Evan Caldwell was led out the other door. As he passed the prosecution table, he looked at the empty chair where the victim's statement had been read. He looked terrified. He realized, finally, that he hadn't been caught by a lucky break. He had been caught because an 82-year-old bookkeeper had outplayed him. Then there was my mother. Monica Hughes was not in handcuffs. She sat in the front row, clutching her purse until her knuckles were white. She had avoided prison time by cooperating with the prosecution in the final weeks, providing details about Reagan's movements and the witness signatures. She pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of misdemeanor falsification of documents. Her sentence was 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. But as she stood up to leave the courtroom, the crowd parted around her like she was contagious. People whispered. They pointed. The socialite of Chesterfield, the woman who lived for appearances, was now a pariah. She walked over to me. She looked old. The carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the deep lines of shame etched into her face. "Lucy," she said, her voice trembling, "are you coming home?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had signed her name to a lie because it was easier than confronting her golden child. "No, Mom," I said. "I am going to visit Grandma." "But she is—" Mom gestured vaguely toward the ground. "She is gone." "I know," I said. "But I have one last thing to do." I turned and walked out of the courthouse, into the bright, blinding sunlight of the afternoon. The drive to the cemetery was quiet. I turned off the radio. I wanted to hear the wind rushing past the windows. Vivian was buried in a small plot on a hill, under a massive oak tree. It was a simple headstone, just her name and dates, no flowery poetry, just the facts. Vivian Hughes, 1944 to 2026. I parked the car and walked up the grass. The ground was soft. I was carrying the white envelope Reagan had given me in the lawyer's office, the final piece of the puzzle. I reached the grave and knelt down. I didn't kneel out of obligation. I didn't kneel because it was what a grieving granddaughter was supposed to do. I knelt because I was tired and because I was grateful. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered to the cold stone. "We got them. The math checked out." I traced her name with my finger. "Reagan is going away for 4 years," I told her. "Evan got 7. Mom is Mom. She is alone." A breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree, a sound like shuffling papers. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. "For Lucy." I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in her familiar, jagged script. It was dated 14 months ago, the same week she had visited Evan Caldwell at the bank. I began to read. My dearest Lucy, if you are reading this, then the trap has sprung, the director has fallen, and your sister has faced the music. I want to tell you a secret about the day I went to the bank. I didn't go there to beg Evan Caldwell. I went there to audition him. I sat in his office, and I played the confused old woman. I asked him about my policy. I asked him if there was any way to change the beneficiary without all that complicated video nonsense. I saw his eyes light up. Lucy, I saw the greed flare in his pupils like a match in a dark room. He told me, "Oh, Mrs. Hughes, we can certainly look into streamlining the process for you." That was when I knew. I knew he was corrupt, but knowing is not proving. If I had reported him then, he would have denied it. It would have been his word against a senile old lady's. So, I had to let him think the door was open. I left the bait. I told him my granddaughter Reagan handled my affairs. I saw him write her name down. I knew they would come for the money. I knew they would try to override the system. I had to let them do it. I had to let them commit the crime so you could find the evidence. It was a dangerous game, I know, and I am sorry I had to use you as the closer, but I knew you were the only one who would check the trash. I knew you were the only one who would look at the rejection stamps and ask, why? You were my insurance policy. Lucy, not the money. You, now, about the $2 million. Do not let it change you. You are a person of detail, of quiet observation. Do not become loud. Do not become Reagan. But do not be invisible anymore. I want you to take a portion of the money, the interest, perhaps, and do something useful. There are many old people in this city who do not have a Lucy. They are alone, and the wolves are circling. Buy them a shield. The rest is yours. Buy a house with a view of something other than a parking lot. Buy the good coffee. I love you, my detail hawk. You were the only one who ever really read me. Love, Grandma. I lowered the letter. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. She had set it all up. She had walked into the lion's den and played weak, so the lion would expose his throat. She had used Evan's own arrogance against him. She had used Reagan's greed against her, and she had trusted me to finish it. I will, I whispered. I will buy the shield. I stood up. My knees were wet from the grass. I wiped my face. I looked at the headstone one last time. Rest in peace, Grandma, I said. The audit is complete. 6 months later, I am sitting in a new office. It is not in a glass tower. It is a small storefront in downtown Richmond, sandwiched between a bakery and a dry cleaner. The sign on the door reads, "The Vivian Hughes Elder Defense Grant." We are a small operation. It is just me, a paralegal named Sarah, and Gideon Weller, who comes in on Tuesdays to consult pro bono. We provide free legal and financial auditing for seniors who suspect they are being exploited. Just last week, we caught a contractor trying to charge a 90-year-old woman $50,000 for a roof repair that should have cost $5,000. We stopped a nephew from draining his aunt's savings account using a forged power of attorney. We are busy. The wolves are always circling. I still work as an auditor, but now I work for myself. I still read the fine print. I still check the decimals. But now, when I find a discrepancy, I don't just send an email. I send a subpoena. I bought a house. It has a garden. I am learning to grow azaleas, keeping the invasive ivy away, just like Grandma would have wanted. Reagan writes to me from prison. Her letters are short, awkward, but real. She is taking classes. She is working in the library. She says the silence is good for her. We are slowly, painfully, building something that might one day resemble a relationship. It is not a storybook ending, but it is an honest one. I think about Evan Caldwell sometimes. He is serving his time in a federal camp in West Virginia. I wonder if he thinks about the old woman in the gray cardigan who sat in his office and played the fool. I wonder if he realizes that she was the smartest person in the room. I look at the framed photo of Vivian on my desk. She is not smiling. She is looking at the camera with that sharp, assessing gaze. She taught me that the world is full of stories, and most of them are lies. People lie to get what they want. They lie to hide what they have done. They lie to make themselves feel better. But the numbers don't lie. The timestamps don't lie. The trash can doesn't lie. My grandmother used to say, "In this house, people live by stories. You live by evidence." She was right. And in the end, the evidence was the only thing that survived. The truth doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to wear a designer dress or cry on cue. It doesn't need a high-priced lawyer or a complex override code. The truth just needs to stand there, quiet and patient, waiting for someone to care enough to look at it. It just needs to stand until the end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope it reminded you that sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones you should never underestimate. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from, whether you are in your car, at work, or maybe even double-checking your own family's paperwork right now. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Monica Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay sharp, read the fine print, and I will see you in the next story.